I see Baba is here. And I'm just still waiting on Yona. Hadn't heard from him. Dang, I broke my watch. So I don't have a clue what time it is right now. But let me check my phone one more time. Figured I don't want to keep you guys waiting too much longer. If we don't hear, I mean, I rescheduled last week and pushed the show back, so I get if he might be a little bit mixed up on the time, so not faulting him. But if nothing else, then there's definitely some other stuff that we can get into and talk about. Since I did do the work of setting everything up, not like I'm not going to talk about something before I get off here. So I see, hey Liz, I see my sweetie out there. Oh yeah, and for those who didn't catch it last night, we had a special guest stop by over on the Political Matrix. We had Pastor Jardula from AM Wake Up and the Convo Couch come and join us, and he asked a pretty interesting question. He talked about on some of these Twitter spaces, and I've been kind of getting on them a little bit lately, not really saying much, just kind of sitting in the background, just listening and trying to get a feel for the perspectives of the people and what's going on with people, you know, as far as Twitter, especially since Elon Musk has kind of switched things up, and you see I would say that you see a heavily MAGA kind of MAGA feel to Twitter these days. And I don't know, maybe conservatives feel like they have been alienated from the platform, and so Elon Musk felt the need to overcompensate and push them more. I do see a depressing of more of the independent vote, and well, not vote, but independent block, people who are independently left, or even just maybe kind of have some right and some left wing point of views. I mean, I myself, technically, you could say some stuff that I believe would be right or left or whatever. Oh crap! I didn't even set up a rock fin. Let me go over here and get the rock fin stream going. No, don't do that. It almost made me not made me. I almost re-recorded over. Where's it at? There it is. I almost re-recorded over the rock fin. I do not know what that is. I guess Dr. Gray is put some. Sorry, so cool. Now I got the rock fin on. Sometimes I forget that there is a little bit of delay. Yeah, Jared says very heavy MAGA band, and I guess I can kind of go into what I was talking about, the differences between you know, some of these different viewpoints. Everybody who is like, for instance, the American conservative, basically the only groups of people who are more to the right of a conservative would be like, you'd have to be talking about some kind of a religious fundamentalist, or somebody who outright calls himself a fascist. There is no more further right that you can get than an American conservative. And because they are so far to the right that they don't realize that there's a whole lot of room on the left before you. What the heck? That is weird. Can you hear me? So a sound check. That's weird. My audio just went straight out. So hopefully The audio is still good. I don't know. It's been doing some weird things. Everybody out there, let me know if you can hear me still. Um, but yeah, if there's any problems with sound, please let me know. So I guess I'll get back into what I was saying. For instance, and what I've noticed is most of these people on the right, they have the perspective that cultural things are what make you a leftist. Okay, good. Thanks, Beth. Um, that that because you are LGBTQ, that's far left, or because you are non-binary, that makes you far left. That can't be further from the truth of what an actual leftist is, which tells me that most of the people here in America do not understand what actually makes you a left and what makes you to the right. It is your economics. It's your economic worldview. It's not if you believe if you're so-called pro-life or pro-choice. That has nothing to do with economics. That has nothing to do with you being right or left. It just happens to be in America that a lot of the people who lean to the right may happen to align with these cultural norms and values. That doesn't mean it's the same thing. So just wanted to put that declaration out there. Um, Also, um, a lot of the people who espouse some of this, some of the non-binary stuff or some of the so-called woke stuff, a lot of them might be, Mayor Pete supporters, maybe Kamala supporters, Biden supporters. That does not mean you're left. You can't sit there and talk about that you're going to do the Willow Project, and which has to do with oil drilling, and then talk about that you are concerned about climate change. You can't do that and maintain any kind of left point of view. And then also you go into say a country like China, which the CCP is considered it's supposed to be communist. It's not communist. It definitely. I mean, you have private businesses. You cannot have a private business within communism. You can't have a social class where you have poor and rich and multi-billionaires who are not a part of the government. I mean, now the Western media will try to say, no, well, all the corporations are tied in. That's not true. You can see because these corporations many times acquiesce to the different nations which they do business in. So, for instance, TikTok, which we were talking about the other night, TikTok does a lot of their time in Western countries. A lot of their influence goes into Western countries. Not all, and I'm not saying even majority, but a lot of it does. There's a lot of TikTok being used throughout the U.S., throughout Great Britain, throughout the various different NATO countries, and they have to follow those guidelines. And so when there's somebody who is doing content which is critical of China, if they were under the CCP's guise, that would not be allowed. I mean, because the CCP wouldn't allow it themselves. So if they were putting this hardcore press down on these tech industries, you would be able to see and you could make that claim. But if you're going to make that claim, then could you not make that claim about United States? Because when Facebook, or what is it called, Meta now, when you had all the COVID stuff come out, did they not acquiesce to what the government wanted them to do? Were there not channels being taken down off of this very platform that we're on, YouTube and the Rock Fins and the likes, because they would not follow what was being told? In fact, I'm gonna give him. Maybe he didn't check my message, but give me 1 sec. I'm gonna give him a call just to double check. Give me 1 second, please. All right, good news. We got a hold of Yona. And so Yona will be joining us shortly. Let me double check over on the Rock feed and see if anybody has chimed in on that side. Any questions, comments, concerns? I see we have two hopping in, which since I don't do content on this channel as often, for those who are new to this channel, I've kind of more or less did my interviews or single stuff. Chris might hop in. He has the link, so he might hop in here later on. Yona's gonna hop in, but I guess since Yona's about to hop in, I guess I'll start setting it up for Yona. The reason why I wanted to have him on here, and before I was going to have Octo Squid on at the same time, I'm going to have to separate that and probably work out sometime either next week or the week after to have Octo Squid on. He's still doing some of his work, getting everything set up over on he's on the ground in East Palestine. He's doing interviews out there, and he's kind of working on, I guess, more kind of like a documentary. So I figure, he asked if I could give him a little bit more time to work on it. So we're going to give him a little bit more time to get that worked out. And then when he has that completed, then he could come on and we could talk about it more in detail. But I wanted to have them both on because Yona is, this has probably been a couple weeks now, but for those who know Yona is out in the West Virginia area. And he's been he was doing some interesting reporting talking about Dow Chemicals. And I don't want to spoil too much of it, and I'll let him elaborate more. But some of the chemicals that were talked about in the East Palestine spill, that has a lot to do with some of the reporting which he's been doing in West Virginia. And I just found it very interesting that these same chemicals that are being dealt with there have a deep tie to some of these trains that are moving stuff around. I don't know if you guys have heard, but there's recently been a couple more train derailments. This one's not it's not Norfolk Southern, I believe. Actually, Burlington Northern Santa Fe has just had a spill. I'm not entirely sure of all the details on it, but when we get more, of course, me and Chris will talk about it. Probably have it on next week. Especially if it turns out to be some kind of environmental waste, or not necessarily environmental, but just kind of some kind of waste which could bleed into the ground and cause some kind of environmental damage. As far as I know, that there's not. It's not to the level of East Palestine, but definitely is something that we need to watch out on, because all of these things, as they seep into the land, it poisons a lot of times our crops, food. It can get into the water supplies and things which you might not see right on the surface originally that happen, but down the road could start to manifest into bigger problems. And that's some of the stuff you see with Bayer and Monsanto and some of these power lines and stuff like that around the certain neighborhoods. You don't see it right away, but 5, 10, 15 years down the road, that's when you start to see those impact the people. And then because it's so far down the road, it's easier for these companies to distance themselves from it and feel like they have no obligation to help you with the issues that you're dealing with, especially when it comes to medical. Shira says, back when I was a Democrat, I was still left because I had the same beliefs, but I didn't understand that Dems didn't really believe what they were saying. Yeah, like I'll give people a perfect example. In my personal life, I always, even from say being like 18 years old, felt if I got a woman pregnant, I was against abortion personally, but I believed in it being her choice. So my views were anti-abortion always, but I didn't feel like I was going to force that on a woman. I also felt no issues with the with bearing arms. I grew up in a state where a lot of people bared arms and they didn't have any problems. Give me a thumbs up whenever you're ready, Yona, and then I'll bring you on. Yes, we are having these train derailments regularly. I also believe a lot in the and some stuff, which I don't want to get into the red pill, black pill lanes and stuff that some of these people talk about, but I do believe in, traditional family roles. I do believe that it helps the kid's development to be able to have a strong male figure in the home, strong female figure in the home, and they're able to get that balance of strength and guidance, and also be able to get the nurturing, organization, and all those things that a lot of times a woman brings to the table. Not saying that men can't bring it to the table also, but a lot of times I find women are a lot better with the multitasking and making a house an actual home. But yeah, we got Yona here. I'm gonna bring him on up. What is up, my man?
Yo, my friend. What's happening? Young
I'll
Morphin DJ Yona in the building at the same time. Look out, world.
Yeah, I was giving them just a little bit of setup before we got you in here about how a lot of what you were talking about with the Dow Chemical stuff does have a deep tie to the East Palestine stuff, and with just some of these different spills in general, because a lot of people don't realize how many different chemicals are being transported by trains and railways. And where are these chemicals coming from? Places like Bayer and Dow Chemicals. And what you also see a lot of times is where are they often located, Yona?
Well, the petrochemical industry always seems to be on the other side of the tracks, in the poorest neighborhoods, when we're not talking about the Gulf Coast. But when we're talking about from the Big Easy, that's New Orleans, for those that aren't familiar, NO to the LA, what's happening in New Orleans, and all the way over to the Petro Metro, which is Houston, H-Town, baby, and everything in between, Beaumont, Port Arthur, Bay City, it's the petroleum coast. And it's primarily populated with Hispanic and African American and Vietnamese American, along with several native tribes that are still around there, Cohutta being one of them, the Huma, the Caddo, and others. In fact, Texas itself is a Caddo word, Tesha, which means their word for friend. But, we see that the dirtiest industries are allowed to proliferate and operate in an even more unregulated manner when their neighbors are Section 8 and Indian reservation and, projects and trailer parks. It's a rather socioeconomic type thing when you see this type of clashing in what I, as a land surveyor, would characterize as bad planning, bad city planning. I mean, there's video games where you can do that. You know what I'm saying? More like Sim City and
is it bad planning, or is this a design behind this? Is this people having a very sinister, I'd say malevolent like ideology, feeling like, you know what, I can do it over there because who cares about those people?
It's bad planning in every sense of the term, except for the OGs that rock bad like it's good. My bitch bad. My bitch bad. My bitch hood. But I'm talking about bad like you're characterizing, like malevolence, deliberate and premeditated, or bad like incompetent and just silly dumb to the point that it ain't even funny. Just silly dumb. And
I was gonna say, at any time that you want to share your screen, because I know you took some videos and stuff. Anytime you want to share your screen, let me know, and we can put any videos up, any articles, stuff that you wrote, whatever, and we could talk about.
You caught me at the most ideal time, my friend, because I'm going to say I'm about 98% complete with the text, and I'm about 80% complete with the images that I've been putting into this. And I just posted it up here. Let me see if this thing is on the real thing. I posted it in two places. but it's a new article because yesterday, I left early in the morning, and while I was doing my work, because I gig on the side, DoorDash and Lyft and Uber and all that, and so that enables me to take trips and get farther away from home, and then turn the cell phone on to an app, and then immediately I'm like Cat Williams flipping burgers, Rick Ross hustling wherever I'm at, whatever spot I'm at, whether I'm Charleston or Columbus or Cleveland, whatever the case may be. And so yesterday, as I was researching this story that I'm going to get the post over, the link over to here as quick as I can. But the name of the story is called 7 Ranges of Toxicity of American Empire. Inspection, then infection. Invasion, then extermination. Exploitation, then exhilaration, and ultimately exoneration. And so explaining all of this history of American empire and how toxic it is and how it's literally I don't mean to laugh, but it's just such serendipitous as an author to put this story together with 7 different elements like this. And they're all literally tied to the very same spot on the ground where the states of Pennsylvania, Ohio, and West Virginia all meet on the Ohio River at the mouth of the Little Beaver Creek, which drains all of the land around the derailment site on Norfolk Southern's Cleveland-Pittsburgh main line, just to the east end of the incorporated city of East Palestine, literally within a literal stone's throw. Like, I'm going to say maybe 300 feet away from the Pennsylvania state line is where the train derailed. So, I mean, it technically was entirely within Ohio, but I mean, literally the first squirt of oil spraying out of that engine, and the first fumes immediately were passing over into Pennsylvania because they're right on the state line and right on top of Lastly Run being one of the main tributaries that feeds down into the Little Beaver Creek and then dumps into the main channel of the Ohio River just 40 miles below its source, where it's formed in the middle of Pittsburgh, next to where the Steelers play, with Allegheny coming in from the north out of Kidney, and then Monongahela and Yuccanany coming in from the east. And there they form the Ohio. So you just go 40 miles straight down the river. Bam, you're right there where West Virginia, Ohio, and Pennsylvania all meet up right at the mouth of this creek that has been spitting out purple and rainbow lining on the water, riding on top like a film. You know what I'm saying? Deer going down to the mouth of the creek, and all up and down that creek were immediately dropping dead from drinking the water. Before the controlled burn even. And there's been videos posted on Twitter, people being at the mouth of it. Shout out to College Station, Texas, and Texas A&M. Go Aggies. And shout out to Purdue University up in Indiana. Go Boilermakers. It's March Madness, but I got to give love to those 2 universities because they're actually doing soil and ground samples and testing. Way more than Ohio State DEP, which is, the Ohio State EPA, they're allowed to be in charge of testing the soil, and EPA tests the air. And so
you just heard the numbers, right? The new report about the numbers. That being high.
So the numbers we're getting from Texas A&M and Purdue, 14 times higher than state standards, the highest numbers they've ever seen of any samples. And yet you still have the gubernatorial administrations in 2 states. They're saying, I can't just put this on little Keebler looking Mike DeWine in Columbus in Ohio's Capitol building. I got to throw shade on you, man, in Harrisburg and Pennsylvania. He did the same thing. They were both shoulder to shoulder over something. Now, listen, citizens, we're going to do a very safe, controlled burn. Just a couple days, so you might want to kind of move away a little bit while we take care of business and get this railroad back open as fast as we can. Meanwhile, it should have been an immediately dangerous to life and health evacuation of at least a 5-mile perimeter. That rail line should have been shut down for at least 30 days. And they could have, I'm no expert, but I've worked with railroads. I'm highly familiar with R.J. Corman Salvaging. They're the company that comes in to put the trains back on the tracks, literally, with their colors of red and gray and black. R.J. Corman, C-O-R-M-A-N. His main pad's in Nicholasville Road, Nicholasville, Jessamine County, just outside of Lexington, Kentucky. Middle of horse thoroughbred farm country where they raise the winners of the Kentucky Derby horse races, stuff like that. Fancy, just to give you an idea of where it's at. All this money that's coming in here and corporate flex. And so this story that I've written to encapsulate it, I tell the story at the mouth of this creek, the Little Beaver Creek, where the 3 states meet. And in fact, the very first time the colonizers upon this shore really got serious about geography and marking boundaries between different entire colonies is when Benjamin Dixon and Benjamin Mason and Jeremiah Dixon. Mason and Dixon were the 2 surveyors who were hired to mark the boundary of Pennsylvania's Dutch claims between the Catholic claims of the Maryland settlers, who of course founded Baltimore, for example. Go Ravens. Y'all stole them from Indianapolis, but I ain't mad at you. Because what goes around comes around. Because originally Baltimore's team was stolen to Indianapolis in Mayflower trucks, believe it or not. I can't make it up. See how history rhymes? No, and it was Mayflower trucks. But anyways,
in the middle of the night.
Yeah, in the middle of the night. They drove from Baltimore all the way to Indianapolis, right down Interstate 7, right smack through the middle of Ohio, right through Wheeling, West Virginia. And so between Wheeling, West Virginia, and Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, the entire story of American history takes place. I mean, that's the very stretch of river where you have homes on the Ohio side opposite what was then just the Virginia side until West Virginia was formed somewhat dubiously during the middle of the Civil War. But nonetheless, that was the boundary and the beginning point of the Underground Railroad. For slaves that sought their freedom, they had to get the fuck out of Virginia, man. Outrun the dogs and the overseers and the house Negroes that play violin and, Augustus and Octavian and all the rest. Master, I seen them running that way, because they don't want to get to eat high on the hog where everybody else eating guts and taking whips, So anyways, that's where they crossed the river and they got all these houses where they'd meet up with, Sojourner Truth and Harriet Tubman and others. And the Underground Railroad led across Ohio to Canada. And that's what a lot of people miss when they hear about the Underground Railroad. They think the Underground Railroad was to get to the Ohio River. Man, that's where it began. Once you got to the Ohio River, now you're free to run as fast as you can to get the hell up north as far as you can, preferably Canada.
North or like, yeah, because
or Mexico, like Juan Caballo, aka John Horse, did with Quakichi, the Wildcat Seminole chief.
There's a part in Kansas City, which you see in my background, where the Missouri River, where there's a part where it comes up from Missouri going into the Kansas side, where a lot of people went into Kansas and different parts of the plains and went into native territories. And a lot of times we're taken in on reservations, or if not, some of them were actually from reservations, because a lot of people don't factor in that during slavery, Native Americans were enslaved. Some Native Americans were being enslaved also. So,
but also not to be missed is the fact that so many slaves throughout the early history of the establishment of plantations were able to escape and not get recaptured and either formed independent communities within the wildland or allied and were naturalized, fully naturalized, just like a foreigner coming to the United States and learning the Pledge of Allegiance and taking an American history test and learning English. You know, they were fully naturalized into the Calusa or Tamiqua or other Seminole tribes in the area, or like the Gullah Geechee and others. And like, for example, in Jamaica and the Caribbean, they're known as maroon communities. Like the color maroon is how it's spelled, but maroons refer to self-liberated communities. Rather than be emancipated, they said, fuck this. And they went into the wildland, whether it's the Everglades swamps or the lower mountains of, you know, between Macon and Statesboro, getting up in the middle of Georgia, and allied themselves or established allied communities with the natives. And so they themselves moved with marches to freedom, whether it was going to Mexico or finding your way to Canada, you know, being led by, you know, Harry Tubman's Sojourner Truth and others. Because, you know, when you think of the Underground Railroad, this is basically a massive network of people of like ethic and consciousness in an era when they didn't have, you know, pagers, texting, or instant messaging, or none of that. And so the fact that they were able to establish a system of communication with lamps and lights and everything else, and, you know, hollowed out hay bales and covered wagons and everything to make this operation. And again, it all happens at the same place, at the mouth of this creek, you know. And so I was inspired to write this article by Dr. Gerald Horn, who's a very prolific author and a distinguished professor at the Louisiana State University in Baton Rouge. And because, you know, my initial take on it was as a surveyor, because I knew when I looked at the map of East Palestine when it first happened, and I found out about it on that night on February the 3rd, because, you know, I'm a rail buff, and some of my favorite videos to watch on YouTube are just videos taken in the last 24, 48 hours of trains going up and down different crossings, whether we talk, you know, Greenville, South Carolina, or Kansas City, Missouri, or, you know, out there in Nebraska at the UP headquarters where they, you know, service all of their locomotives. Because, you know, actually in Kansas City, I believe, is the only city in all of North America that is serviced by all 5 Class 1 railroads.
That's true.
Norfolk Southern, CSX, Burlington Northern Santa Fe, Union Pacific, and who's the 5th one, baby? Go Chiefs! Kansas City Southern. That's right.
That's true.
And Kansas City Southern on track from Canada and all across the United States and in Mexico. Kansas City Southern's the railroad that's in 3 countries.
Yeah, and you notice in the background, that's Union Station. That building right there on the side, Union Station, which used to run the Amtrak line, that will run back and forth. Now, they just recently just brought it back where it's
the Missouri Runner. They've gone down through Jeff City to the St. Lunatics. Yeah.
Jeff City, Joplin, Chicago, and I think they're trying to work some out to like Tulsa and Denver. So eventually they're going to start going back to the way it used to be, how it was, you know, a national rail line, commercial rail line.
Yeah.
But still have the, you know, the major 5 that you just listed. And
what they need to do is connect that heartland corridors, right? Because right now they got that heartland corridor train, and it only runs from Dallas to Fort Worth up to OK City. And they've done studies and they talked about it for years to just run it on up through Wichita up to Newton, Kansas, where it can connect to the UP line at Topeka and by Lawrence, Kansas, you know, go Jayhawks,
Yeah.
And then you would have a continuous new line running from Chi-Town through Springfield, East St. Louis, Jeff City, KC, round through to Lawrence, Topeka, and then down through Wichita, OK City, and bam into and then hit Fort Worth, Dallas, and to Houston. And
Which
that would be a new line because they have Texas Eagle right now, but it bypasses everything. Texas Eagle leaves from St. Louis, goes into the middle of nowhere in the Ozarks, and then pops back out in Texarkana, and don't serve nobody but Little Rock. But I ain't gonna talk bad on Little Rock or Arkansas because I'm happy and I don't feel suicidal. You know what I'm saying?
Well, yeah, Burlington, Northern Santa Fe is one of the only ones that hits all those because their major hub, their number one hub is in Dallas Fort Worth, and number two is KC, number three is Minneapolis, and then the other one is in can't remember which part of Mexico it is, but it's a certain part of Mexico, and so it surprised a lot of people when they hit those.
It'll be Guadalajara. That's the center where they all meet. Guadalajara. Yeah.
It might be Guadalajara. Yeah. I was thinking it was either Guadalajara or Jalisco, but I people wonder why when they get to the Midwest they're surprised to see like a heavy let's say Latino population there also in those areas, and I'm like, this isn't something that's just something that you guys think, oh, well, this just must be immigration. No, there's always been populations because that went back and forth well before there was this whole dividing line of, okay, we got a giant border and you can't go across this area.
Well, in particular, to build on what you're saying and back you up, there's been a bracero program traditionally in California that was successful for decades. The braceros being workers that lived in Mexico, but they would just come in and pick during season.
Yep.
By permit. So, this isn't a Rubik's Cube, Marcus. You know what I'm saying? We don't have to reinvent the wheel. They've had immigration to work before. It's better for them with a broken system, with more undocumented workers, because they're the easiest workers to fully exploit. And anytime they want to speak up or step out of line, La Migra show up and take them back across the border. And then they send another one of their lackeys down there with a gooseneck trailer straight down to Eagle Pass or Falfurrias County in Texas, load up the gooseneck, bring them right back up to, I don't know, say, for example, the Tyson Chicken Plant in Morristown, Tennessee. Pick any state, pick any factory, pick any barn, pick any field. It don't matter. We're talking about exploitation because capitalism says success is when you make more profit than your competitors, when you expand your market share, when you make your monopoly bigger and eat up more and gobble up more small fish. That's capitalism, man. And that's not really a free market or encouraging entrepreneurship like a Black Wall Street in Tulsa existed before the rioters burned it down. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I would specify laissez-faire capitalism, because laissez-faire capitalism in particular is capitalism with no barriers. It's like having boxing and you have no weight classes. Yeah. The heavyweights can fight lightweights and featherweights. It doesn't matter. If you're in competition, they can smash you. And you need to have some kind of checks and balances. That's the reason why I've always, as far as like my political leanings, I've always supported mixed economies, because you gotta have a little bit of both. I mean, I believe in just balance in general. If you're too heavy one-sided anyway, it's going to lead to some kind of problems. And you're also going to have a segment of the population which is not going to acquiesce to it. And so therefore, you're always going to have a resistant class, a higher resistant class. So you're going to have a 50-50 who's never going to be happy. Whereas if you find that balance in a mix, you're always going to have somebody who's not going to be happy. Somebody's always getting the short end of the stick, no matter what system you have. But
there doesn't seem to be a fine line, but instead a rather slippery slope that characterizes the two situations, where either on the one hand you have a citizenry that has regulatory controls and agencies with sufficient teeth and funding to be able to actually protect the public health and safety and welfare and pursuit of happiness. Where on the other hand, there's not enough teeth in the regulation. There's not enough funding of the agencies, and instead you end up with, quite frankly, global corporations that really don't have any particular nation's interests at heart, that then use different sovereign governments to regulate their own customers. And so, the horrifying admissions have come of late. Take the example of Boeing's latest invention, the 737 MAX, which was grounded from the air for over 2 years by most countries, less by the FAA, because the FAA had to admit to Congress that, well, they act upon whatever needs to be fixed with Boeing whenever Boeing lets them know that they're not in compliance. And we
Even though they had all
their own work.
They had all those avionics failures, and then they didn't want to bring the plane down and deal with it. And so their lobbyists said, shut up, you're going to put it through anyway, and we'll patchwork it as it fails.
And that's probably the most malevolent characteristic of capitalism. If I had to make any one particular criticism, that would be the fact that human lives and damages and deaths thereupon are merely calculated as a cost of doing business. Just we'll pay a fine because, and I talk about this. Let me bring out the specific quote. I call it a protocol. Here, let's see.
Oh, and I want to throw a shout out real quick to Pacheco Rome.
Exoneration. Here it is. I found it at the end. Go ahead.
No, yeah, just shout out real quick to Pacheco Rome. Thanks over there on the Rockville side. We got a couple listening in, and if you guys have any questions for Yona, please throw those questions in there, and I'll try to fire those questions at Yona and see if he can get you guys an answer. But yeah, I remember having this conversation with my brother, and it was talking about how certain corporations literally have a certain amount of people, which they already know this. They've already factored this into the cost of doing business. How many people are going to die yearly in their corporation? And is it going to cost? How much does it cost to fix this problem that we know is going to kill people? Or is it worth it to just pay out the fine or the insurance and the funeral and the medical and all that for that person? And so a lot of times they'll say, you know what? We know this is going to give them cancer. Fine. We'll make sure that our healthcare is decent enough that it covers that aspect. And as they slowly die off, that's fine because we make enough money off of this product that is perfectly fine. And that's what we're seeing. Even more so back to, what we're talking about with this railroad industry and how, some of the stuff that's been going on with some of the deregulation. They're not going to put it on a Democratic or Republican side because it's both sides that have been doing this shit. And it's not just something that just happened over the last 4 years or 8 years. This is something that has gone back that I've been able to trace myself without even doing deep dives for more than 30 years. I'm talking about 30 to 40 years that we've been watching lead up to the situations we're having with all these continual derailments and spills. Am I wrong, Yona?
Well, and I'm glad you said derailments and spills because that's much more inclusive, and that immediately brings to mind the Exxon Valdez polluting Prince William Sound in Alaska. That brings to mind the collapse of the Deepwater Horizon drilling rig in the Macondo oil field in the Gulf of Mexico, permanently damaging the shrimping industry in the Gulf. And so the turn of phrase, the way that I worded this was as follows. This new protocol, I call it, the immediate and unquestioned exoneration of corporate misconduct from punishment with imprisonment, much less death, is now the standard protocol for business regulation of the bigger-than-life monopolies that essentially puppet master national governments, most notably and conspicuously in the United States and other failed states and banana republics.
Well, I agree. And I guess, since she asked this question, we're going ahead and get it out there. Tammy is good evening, all. My first time hearing Yona. Thank you for having me as a guest. So glad to have him on. I've been planning on having Yona on for the longest, but when I saw this story that he was working on, I was like, this is perfect. I got to do it now. She asked, does Yona have a YouTube channel? Yes, he does, and I'll let him answer the rest.
Okay, that's couldn't be a more timely question, because while I was tuned in to one of my favorite shows, and arguably the best damn show on weekday mornings, shout out to Craig Pasta Jardula and Steve Poikinen, aka the Macro Master, on their show AM Wake Up that they do together on Rockfin. I don't know if it's on other platforms, but it's primarily Rockfin.
Well, they have
anyhow, Wednesday at about 12 noon this past Wednesday, while I was on there, unbeknownst to me until about 12:30, when I clicked over to a YouTube tab and saw the dreaded Google message. And so then I logged into the Gmail and read that for posting a copy of the video that my partner in journalism, the Drizzle at Grand Theft World with Richard Grove and friends, he had put together, because I sent him the raw videos that I'd collected in the field, and then he edited them and put them all together and added the graphics and everything. And so with that all packaged together, I went to upload that to my channel. Bam, that was my third strike for
really
this information. And they took down my second YouTube channel, which had just reached 100 subs, and it had taken me, I guess, about 4 or 5 months to build it up after they yeeted my first YouTube channel some 4 or 5 months ago that I'd had since 2007. And when they yeeted that channel, they actually killed some 8 to 10 hours, about 5 episodes completely of my podcast, gone forever when that was taken down. And fortunately, at least all of the different original songs and song mixes and DJ sets and everything else, all my albums, I got hard copies. And of course, after the first YouTube channel was lost and I had to make a second one, I immediately, I had learned from James Corbett, who does a show from Japan, but in English, the Corbett Report. I had the heads up from him that you needed to diversify to other platforms. So, I already had a Rumble channel and BitChute channel and Odyssey channel. So I've been putting things over there. But long story short, I had an alternate third channel that I would just use for chatting and nothing else. And so at least now I can still get on the internet. I haven't uploaded anything on my third channel. And I don't know if I'm going to play Charlie Brown and Lucy with the whole kicking the football with YouTube over and over and over again. I would envision in the future doing something like maybe The Last American Vagabond does, like when it comes to pirate streaming, but only as a simulcast to my mainstream going somewhere else. Because, it's kind of like being on the dance floor. You get turned down so many different times. You either just go home crying and alone, or you just find somebody else to dance with, man. You know what I'm saying? and, we're having a fact party, and my phrase is get fact up with the Yona. You know what I'm saying? Because the point of it is to get yourself fact up enough to get out of this caged mentality, to get out of this caged thinking. I think it's best described by Malcolm X in his message to the grassroots, after he explains the distinction between the house Negro who slept in the house with the master and the field Negro who slept in shacks and worked in the rows. And that when time came to escape, and the field Negro would say, we're getting the fuck out of here, man. We're about some freedom. And the response of Octavius or Augustus or whoever, Fiddles for the master, wearing the fine clothes. Wow, y'all want to go somewhere else? Where where y'all gonna find better clothes than this? Where y'all gonna eat better than this? And you hear them say the same thing today.
Yeah.
Where you gonna find a better country than America?
Mm-hmm.
Where you gonna find a better job than this? Shut your mouth. You know,
yep.
Everywhere else is worse than here. And it's all lies. It's all lies. And it's been lies for so damn long. Ain't nobody buying that shit that lives a real life. But see, now we get into what's real and what's not real. And for me, that distinction is, do you take care of yourself and others in life on the day-to-day? Or are you cute and adorable and get pats on the head and scratches behind the ear, and that mixed food and mixed soda pop just keeps magically refilling in the bowls, and you get took care of and get tucked in at night? I ain't got to worry about your pretty little head about nothing. Whoever going to keep taking care of me, they got my vote. I ain't never going to find a better job than this. I ain't never going to find better clothes than this. It's comfortable over here, man. What y'all complaining about? I get to play the fiddle. I got a fancy name, too. See, and so there's still today, the famous black author James Baldwin really describes it best. Everything begins with your perception of reality. Are you real? Are you living in the real? Or are you fake and living in the fake? And I mean, Facebook, Meta, the what do they call it? The metaverse, right? Making your own emoji and getting so deep in the video game, like some Joe type lawnmower man type shit on Stephen King movies, getting so deep into fake and artificial alter egos that your online self is entirely unrecognizable from the person you really are, with personality, with idiosyncrasies, with successes and failures, and because we're all human. And to me, all of these things are taken away from our common humanity to the purpose of dividing us until we're all nothing but the individual and the state. You don't belong to a family anymore. You don't belong to a community anymore. You don't belong to a church anymore. You don't belong to a tribe anymore. We've taken away your cultural heritage. We've given you all brand new names. So, where are you going to get a better job than this? Toby, right? You're not Kunta Kinte anymore. Forget everything you ever knew about the history, everything that ever happened before you became part of our perceived reality. And just keep miming along with us about Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny and George Washington's wooden teeth that were actually made of the teeth extracted from the children of his slaves at Mount Vernon Plantation. So, there's no wonder why there's all this memory holding and euphemism and complete whitewashing and replacement of the entire foundational history and all the history since. So that, when Ted Danson puts on blackface with Whoopi Goldberg to roast somebody, lighten up. That shit's funny. I mean, listen to what the Dilbert guy is saying. He kind of makes some sense, right? No, he don't, man. Not if you know the fucking history of minstrel shows and decades and decades and decades of just in your face, proud, screaming fucking racism. And we're all just supposed to have this collective amnesia like none of that ever happened. And I'm not trying to soapbox. It's just the fact that what motivates me to be online, what motivates me to podcast, what motivates me to write, and what's motivating me to do more and more hands-on journalism is to give voice to the voiceless and to speak the ugliest, most impolite truths. Because, both my parents had master's degrees. My mom graduated from Rice University. Go Owls, Houston, Texas. after my parents married in Dallas, they moved to Pasadena and over by Deer Park, which are suburbs just up from Texas City and Galveston, suburbs of Houston, Texas, Harris County. And then my father then graduated from the Leland Stanford Junior University in Palo Alto, and he got his master's in engineering from Stanford. And so when I was growing up, I got to meet Donald and Rodney McCray and Darrell Griffith and Purvis Ellison and all these other great championship basketball players for the Louisville Cardinals, U of L, in Louisville, Kentucky. At the time, they had coach Denny Crum, who was the lead protege of the UCLA coach John Wooden for basketball enthusiasts. And he led Louisville to 2 titles in 1980 and 1986. And so at that time, my father was a professor, an adjunct associate professor, meaning he taught and got paid nothing pretty much. But he was teaching at the Speed Scientific School, mathematics and everything. So because of that, young ass Yona, like baby Yona, the cute one from the new Star Wars shit, right? Baby Yona is up in these faculty mixers in Louisville. All these different professors. Here I am in the 3rd and 4th grade. I keep talking about, slavery and extermination of tribes. And, well, this word means this in this Indian language. This word means that Indian language. They're all like, well, never heard of that. And I just, every time I came away to these meetings, I was like, man, all these college professors are kind of dumb. They don't really know shit. They just rich. And they all stink. And they either wear musk or perfume and got brooches and just some ugly fucking jewelry. And they just stink. But I like the conversation. And they were always like, gosh, Sam, your son is so precociously intelligent. But he always has such impolite conversation. And, they'd always say, you really need to watch your tone of voice there, son. Don't be so excited in your presentation. Or that's not really polite topic for discussion here. It's such a social event, And,
oh, yeah. Oh, I wanted to tell you real quick. Denver says OCO to you.
OCO, Denver. Denver is that away? Reservations is away.
Mm-hmm.
That's what's up.
Yeah. Baba said here, Deer Park, where Norfolk transported the carcinogenic sludge. By the way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of interesting. I try to, and I was having this conversation with somebody on Twitter, which I know that's always fatal words right there. Conversations on Twitter, especially the atmosphere now, which I kind of talked a little bit. I riffed on a little bit earlier about that. I had this conservative trying to tell me basically that, oh, well, if you don't like how things are here, then you need to go somewhere else. And I asked them this question, and I find that when you hit them with this question, people have a hard time answering it. So where could I go that is a place where I would have this freedom that you're completely believing in that is not impacted by Western powers and influence and manipulation? Where could you go that the West is not going to be meddling in their business or trying to subvert their leaders or any of those things like that? I mean, it's not very many places.
Again, to me, it begins with your perception of reality and how you perceive the world to be.
Which before you get going,
top of that, go ahead.
Before you say this, hold that thought. I want to hear what you're going to say. But I was being a little bit facetious because I'm like, you realize you're talking to somebody who's former military, who's lived in other countries. I know that there's places I could go, me personally, and be perfectly fine. But I'm not talking about only me. I'm talking about more than me, my whole entire community and people who feel like they're feeling an oppression in this country.
That's why I'm back here. That's why I'm back in the United States. I'll show you my visa from where I was a English professor in Cuenca, Ecuador. And here's my Ecuadorian visa there. That's a young Yona there. But that's my visa from the country of Ecuador. You can see their little symbol.
Let me hold on. Let me put you
See
up
if
there.
you can- It's got a pretty little rainbow spiral over here,
Yep.
right there. That's the little Ecuador symbol. But and then you can also see up here by this finger the actual seal of Ecuador, which was always featured prominently on that balcony until Moreno replaced Rafael Correa and sold Julian Assange out to the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, known in Ecuador as El Paquetazo, which prompted the Revolución de los Zánganos, the worker bee revolution. But yeah, of course, free Julian Assange. But back to this perception of reality, it begins with your perception of reality and what you perceive to be true. And then within this, you get more and more of a blinded view, like literally like a horse with blinders on, when it comes to how you receive your opinion rather than form it on your own. And again, I really think it has to do with essentially whether or not you're able to take care of yourself, or you've come to accept and just live dependent upon others' abilities to nourish your very existence. I mean, now for whatever reason, some people may be challenged in life with different challenges, whether it's related to their age or particular abilities or mobility or hearing, vision, whatever. Within the Cherokee Nation, we have what's called Gadugi, where every community organizes a Gadugi party of able-bodied males and females that will get together and go weed a garden or fix a porch or do basic household chores for those that are not able to, whether due to sickness or age or mobility issues or whatever. It's like a community work, and that's essentially what brought me back here, because myself being an Army grunt and being an Arabic linguist in Desert Storm, I had the good fortune of being able to visit France after my high school year was completed, and staying with my friends in France, with Tercy in Paris, and with my friends in Biome and Auvergne in the center. And then I went also and visited my friend Bruno in Liège, Belgium. I'm sorry. But it was in the Army that I really got to do quite a bit of traveling. Well, MAC aircraft, space A, military aircraft, space available, which means very loud, very bumpy ride, shaking your guts. And then you get dumped off, in the McDonald's parking lot of Ramstein, for example.
Oh yeah, I've done
every base overseas is like a little piece of America, as you know, Marcus. We take America everywhere we go.
First thing I saw when I dropped down in Sigonella was a Burger King.
Facts. Did you have it your way, or did the king have his way? Last time I tussled with Burger King, I'm done with him.
Oh, I want to throw a shout out also. I see Gamer for Life has come over. Gamer for Life says, I'm glad Yona is on Rumble and maybe other platforms. It's good to see Gamer in here. Hopefully Gamer is doing well.
Yeah, I know Gamer's been through a whole lot, and I've been burning sage and saying prayers for my man Gamer.
Yeah,
we're a close-knit community because we all care and we all have heart. That's what's up.
And we just had Warren hopped into the building. Hello there, Uncle Warren.
Osio, Kawi about Norway.
Good
old uncle.
Put this.
Speaking of uncle,
yeah.
Well, didn't the Kansas City Chiefs make somebody say uncle this year?
Yes, they did. I mean, my Jayhawks just exited early in March Madness, but I still got K-State. They're still in it for now.
That's some Wildcat right there.
Mm-hmm.
That's Wildcats right there.
Yep.
But they're over in
They're in Manhattan.
Manhattan, that's right. Right at the intersection of the two interstates. Right in the middle of the interstates. They got ramps going right over the middle of their campus.
Yeah, Manhattan is closer to Wichita. And then Lawrence, for those who don't know, Lawrence is closer to Kansas City. The two major cities in the state of Kansas.
Manhattan's up on the main drag, the 70.
Yeah.
Which will run you all the way into Denver coming out of KC.
Yeah, my brother and my mom both are alumni to K-State. My mom just recently getting her master's. So congratulations to her, definitely. I think I
got nothing but love for K-State because I always rooted for K-State against Kansas. Because, growing up in Kentucky and being a Kentucky fan, following Adolph Rupp and Joe B. Hall and then Eddie Sutton. When Eddie Sutton blew up the program and got busted, and the NCAA's put the death penalty on the Kentucky Wildcats basketball program, which at that time was number one, followed by UCLA and Kansas in terms of total victories and championships throughout the years, although UCLA still holds an edge in the number of consecutive championships won. But Kansas is right up there and right at Kentucky's heels when it comes to all-time victories in Division I college basketball. So, much to our chagrin,
basketball
Sutton left and took his son Sean Sutton and left the SEC and went straight up to the Big 12 to the Cowboys in Stillwater. For those that don't know, that's Oklahoma State. And so still to this day, there's a lot of bad blood against Oklahoma State from Kentucky fans for what Eddie Sutton did. And college basketball is weird how people just like grudge and then form these cliques and then just argue till the day is long. A modern example would be like you got Shannon Sharp and the pom-poms for the King, who'll be the first to tell you he's the GOAT. And then you got the other camp of people are like, listen, man, Jordan never even called himself the GOAT. Every time they tried to tell Jordan he was the GOAT, he was always like, nah, that's disrespectful to Wilt and Cliff and everybody else came before me. And, I don't know. I'm not trying to get into that debate. I'm just saying that's one of those ongoing debates where people just keep stirring up mud when it's really rather clear. Are you talking about an individual that's in a team sport or an individual that played best within the team sport? Because, I think the case can be made in terms of individual statistics and the defeat of Kings on their run with the 73 wins. Yes, Shannon Sharp. That individually, arguments could be made for LeBron being the best ever. But as a team player, not off the meltdowns.
It's funny you said that. I just saw somebody put out stats on what was this?
That's my 2 cents.
John Stockton, about how his numbers stacked up against some of LeBron's numbers, and how John Stockton's numbers, as far as being a team player, stacked up far better. I was seeing something in the chat. Yeah, I don't know exactly. I guess they said Gamer had a couple of people blocked. I don't know about that. And shout out to SFT. I see coming in here. It says, damn it, my notification still didn't work. Hey, Yona, good to meet you at Morpheus. Casey Moe here is 44 and a long damn chili. Well, glad you've ran across young Morpheus himself, other known as Marcus Cage in the real world.
But woohoo, right there.
Glad to have you all here. I guess Fred Edwards says all my comments are gone from the chat window. That's weird. I can still see. I don't know. Something happens weird on this channel. I gotta go back and figure it out somewhere. But I've had multiple people say that they're blocked on this channel. I've literally never blocked anybody.
Stop playing, YouTube. Stop that.
This is the one channel where I literally like exploded on somebody in the chat, and I didn't even block that person. The only people that wait a minute. Well, no, it's on the other channel, or I don't know. It might have been when I had Chris on with me, because Chris is a moderator. And we did have somebody during one of our interviews that was being extremely disruptive, and so he went through and was probably could have accidentally blocked some people, but this person created like 6 or 7 different accounts and was trolling really bad against the guests. And even if you don't agree with the guests that I have on, my goal is to hear from the guests and to hear their perspective and to hear their input and knowledge. And say it's a subject like this where Yona actually knows this area, West Virginia. He's literally walked around. He's done the land surveying. He understands, has knowledge of the trains and stuff like that. This is a case where his input is definitely very valuable. In this case that I'm talking about, this is a foreign guest, and they had issues more with that country. And so I'm not going to expect for somebody to go through and attack their own home country. I brought them on because I wanted to hear their perspectives. And,
right.
And
well, I appreciate you putting up the article there. I think my expertise in the area, it really was, everything came together in this story.
Yeah, we're going to put this up here. We're going to go through it. Yes, Jerry, you're correct. That's who it was. But I want all guests to be able to, and if somebody's like, you know what, I have a contrary narrative to that person or their perspective, and they're going to come on and they're going to lay out their arguments in a mature adult manner, I'm perfectly fine with having that person to come right on, right after on the next segment, or if we can work it out where those two get on and they have a debate. I don't mind if it even gets spirited, but I do want respect to go back and forth on this platform and everybody to feel that they have the ability to speak what they know about. And we're not going to have anybody feeling like they're being gaslit and you tell them that they don't know that their own reality. Everybody's going to be able to get their say so and their perspective out here, even if it's contrary at times. Because I have no problem interviewing people which I don't agree with, which lately I've been fortunate to mostly have people that I kind of support the perspective that they're putting out for the most part, definitely. But even if it's not, as long as it can be respectful and a productive dialogue where I feel people can learn from it, it's perfectly fine. And I think we all should encourage that. That's how you get further, by having conversations with people you don't necessarily agree with or people you don't necessarily listen to understand their perspective, and then you can meet in the middle ground. But if you only deal in the circles of the people that you always talk to and agree with, then all you're doing is confirmation bias. But yeah, let's get back to this.
Yeah, I mean, and just to echo what you're saying, ideologies, and mentalities are just like muscles, and they strengthen when you exercise them regularly, and they atrophy and shrivel up when you don't give them any more time. So, that's just my take on it.
Yeah, it's just like a gamer says, I do have conservative relatives and friends. I grew up in a red state. And being somebody who's coming from basically a blue city in a red state. And I would say moderate blue. Kansas City is definitely a blue city. But the whole rest of the state, the 98% of it is red as hell. Even the other major city, Wichita, is pretty red. So let's get into your article a little bit here. All right, let me switch over here.
It was so big, I had to disambiguate it into 7 chapters.
Actually,
I was about 98% done with the text and about 80% done with the images when you reached me on my celly. And so I just went ahead and threw it up on Manufacturing Reality, because when we get done here, I can go back, and in another 15, 20 minutes, it'll be totally done. But it was done enough.
I want everybody to go and check this article out and read it. I'm gonna go ahead and read through it in full later, but I figure I'll go through a little bit of it right now. It starts off good topic. Good what is it? Title. 7 ranges of toxicity of American empire: inspection, then infection; invasion, then extermination; exploitation, then exhilaration; and ultimately exoneration. Yona, can you explain to us why you came up with that very spicy, provocative title? I think I know where you're coming from, and it makes a lot of sense. But can you explain what these 7 different ranges are? What we're talking about here?
Well, it actually stems from the fact that there is a location that is probably more critical to the true narrative and reality of American empire from its very inception, stretching to the present day. And that centers upon this point, which is located on the north bank of the Ohio River at the mouth of the Little Beaver Creek. And this point was originally a wooden stake planted in 1785 by the surveyor of the United States, Thomas Hutchins, after he extended the Mason and Dixon line to the true southwestern corner of Pennsylvania the previous year in 1784, where he then began his survey and ran in the line from the southwest corner of Pennsylvania due north until hitting the Ohio River, where he was able to place that stake, which today, if that stake were still standing, of course, it would be under 45 feet of water and over 238 years old. It's obviously been long gone. But at that location today, we have dioxins and other pollutants that are pouring out of that stream as a result of the malfeasance of Norfolk Southern in the derailment, arguably preventable, of a chemical train and subsequent response, which made it far worse. And again, at the mouth of this same creek onto the Ohio River where these 3 states meet, this was the beginning point for a survey called the 7 Ranges. Thomas Jefferson invented the United States public land system in 1785 as a means to subdivide and sell off new frontier land, which is a euphemism for saying shit we just stole from the Indians that we just killed. And so the U.S. public land system would then go in and survey everything in a grid pattern. And all land would be within perfect square mile sections within townships, maybe 6 miles wide, maybe 5. Initially, they surveyed out 6 mile wide townships with 1 mile sections. And so each 1 mile section is a square of land that measures 1 mile wide by 1 mile deep. That's 5,280 feet, or 320 poles, which equals to 640 acres square. They would then further subdivide these squares of square miles of 640 acres into what are called quarter sections of 160 acres apiece. They then would subdivide it a second time to make quarter sections. And that's how Indian lands were plotted into 40-acre tracts, bearing the statement, bearing that saying that has survived ever since: go out west, line up your wagon, wait for the gunshot, and go stake your 40 acres and a mule. Because 40 acres is a quarter of a quarter section, meaning you're getting some of the land that has been platted by United States Public Land Survey. So Thomas Jefferson invents this in 1785 because at the present time, the U.S. and the 13 colonies, along with parts of most of Kentucky and Tennessee, which were still part of the North Carolina and Virginia colony as settlement was proceeding prior to the 1785 public land law, it was metes and bounds, meaning you could claim any size, any shape, which led to overlapping land claims because they weren't really surveyed, and you could have any shape, any size. So if you have 8 people claiming a lot that's the shape of an octopus with tentacles, you end up with all these different overlapping, and sometimes 4, 5, 6 different landowners all claiming the same pieces of land. It was absolute and total and complete mess. And that's why land surveying still to this day is unbelievably more difficult in the original 13 colonies, Kentucky and Tennessee, what are known as the metes and bounds states, than anywhere else on planet Earth. It's a total fucking shit show, dumpster fire. So seeing that, and George Washington and Thomas Jefferson and others having been practicing land surveyors, and or at least familiar with surveying, they then saw the importance of mapping things out and determining for certain where these things were on the ground. And more importantly, in 1785, this is just, grant you, the Treaty of Paris that ends the American Revolutionary Wars in 1781, I do believe, right? The Revolutionary War lasted for 5 years until the Battle of Yorktown, when George Washington defeated General Cornwallis at Yorktown on Chesapeake Bay, Virginia. Anyhow, that Treaty of Paris in 1781 established American independence officially, right? That now everybody can take a moment to stand and do your Bellamy salute or whatever salute they do to the flag now. But, you know, now we've reached the point 5 years later that there's this tremendous war debt. Alexander Hamilton has talked about taxing the settlers in the parts of Pennsylvania and Virginia, now West Virginia, and the Ohio country that were making whiskey and other spirits and trading those, hence the whiskey tax, which led to the Whiskey Tax Rebellion. And that's when you see notable pioneers in and around Pennsylvania like Jim Beam, Jack Daniels, Elijah Craig, and others. They all then flee down the Ohio River from the whiskey tax collectors and set up shop in places like Clermont, Kentucky for Jim Beam. Elijah Craig sets up in Bourbon County, Kentucky. And so Elijah Craig's whiskey ends up being called the Bourbon County Whiskey. And then they just dropped the county. And today it's still known as bourbon whiskey. Jack Daniels goes down to Lynchburg, Tennessee. He starts making his. So that's what, you know, all of this history is all tied into this one spot on the map that's just 14 air miles south of the East Palestine derailment. That's just 30 miles due west of the Fort Pitt Gate, where Thomas Hutchins, the surveyor who marked the 7 ranges in 1785 as a young recruit in the British Foot Regiment in Fort Pitt. He was one of the actual soldiers that gave out the smallpox blankets that killed Indians that were allied with Chief Pontiac. I'm talking about Thomas Hutchins, and his commanding officer was Henry Bouquet, Colonel Henry Bouquet, whose commanding officer was General Jeffrey Amherst. We have receipts. They're handwritten orders. Originals are at the Library of Congress, free for download. It's called LOC.GO to the V. Get you some of that. We got receipts of all this stuff.
And you know, Yona, people still to this day try to say that, oh no, it was just yellow fever that they caught. That they weren't handing out smallpox blankets.
Oh, no, it's in here. So I'm going to shut up and let you peruse through this and pick out what you want to. You got the Hawkeye, and Si's got the Eagle Eye. Shout out, Si.
Mm-hmm. And people don't realize also with Jack Daniels, and it might even been Jim Beam also. Both of them come from slave owning families, and I know for a fact Jack Daniels, he stole his slave. One of his slaves made his recipe. Mm-hmm. That's often not talked about, but I mean, you'd be surprised how many of these so-called inventions, or not so-called, actual inventions that are given credit by the slave master that were made by one of their slaves.
And you know what that invention was that he gave to Jack Daniels? Mm-hmm. It was what revolutionized the taste of the Tennessee whiskey, and what made it Tennessee whiskey by pouring out of the, once they take the bunt out and pour the final aged contents of the barrel in a plain regular white oak barrel, they would pour it over charcoal white oak coals and embers that had been let to dry and chill. So over cold white oak coals, they would filter it. So it's literally white oak charcoal filtered, and that's what makes it Tennessee whiskey. Whereas bourbon whiskey or Kentucky whiskey, Kentucky bourbon, the green whiskey is initially put into barrels that have had the inside of the white oak barrel charred with flame before. So it's a brand new barrel and it's already been charred all on the inside of the barrel. That way, the entire time it's aging in the oak barrel, it's interacting with the charcoal and picking up the vanilla and all the other flavors.
Mm-hmm. I didn't know you knew your stuff that much on all the whiskeys.
Well, I'm a graduate of Bardstown High School, class of 1992, and Bardstown, Kentucky is the bourbon capital of planet Earth. So, you know, I got to represent for my town, Bardstown Tigers. Ooh, ooh.
Yona, answer this one real quick from Baba.
Mm-hmm.
Says, I live near Amherst, and as a young child, I was told about General Amherst handing out germ virus-ridden smallpox blankets.
Yes, and so that's in this article. If you'll pull it up, you can. If you'll skip down to the chapter labeled "Infection."
All right.
I think it's chapter 2.
So there you go. Got it on the screen, and
should be able to scroll down.
Just keep in mind the TCBDD at this POB tetrachloro-dibenzodioxin. So we're gonna keep that in mind. Keep it in the back of your mind. So we're gonna go back to that.
And there's a map of the 7 ranges survey that I was talking about, and then a picture underneath that I took yesterday on my hands and knees.
Is it this one?
But that's the plat of the map made by Thomas Hutchins himself. And then underneath, you'll see the only surviving monument from that survey today. The 1785 cornerstone planted at the end of the survey in September 13th, 1786. And I found it in the woods, half-mile deep from the road yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
There it is.
You said what section am I looking for?
That's chapter 1. Chapter 2, you'll see it's a different color text, all different color backgrounds. Okay. But there's also a note that says Ed Chapter Wood when you get to the end. Yeah, there's Ed Chapter Wood. Here we go. Here's where it starts. Bam, right there. Chapter 2, infection. Subheading, use every stratagem in our power to reduce them. And I'm going to lay it off the backboard for you there. Do your thing, young Moore.
And this is what a lot of people don't and when he's talking about every power, part of it was infection, part of it was diseases, and how they created these smallpox, these blankets. What they would do is literally the dead and dead animals, they would lay together and they would let them sit there and rot and deteriorate, and with the rot and deterioration, that's when they are more contagious for diseases. They would lay these blankets upon them, oftentimes for easily like a week or so. They would themselves get basically a form of gloved up, a lot of times the old leather gloves, clean blankets and stuff like that they would put on, mask and everything, covering their own mouths and faces, and a lot of times some form of whiskey and stuff like that, wetting them. So that it would help pick up any kind of bacteria, as the wet bacteria and stuff doesn't pass through wet objects nearly as well. Mm-hmm. And so that's how they would collect this stuff. And then they would often send out their prisoners as the brokers or with the different tribal people. And so they're carrying this, not realizing how dangerous and deadly that it is.
The sad thing is the actual exchange that takes place after the idea was conceived by General Amherst. It was his idea after all. And then his subordinate officers were kind of like, think of like on the cartoon The Simpsons, mm-hmm. when you have Smithers next to Mr. Burns. Yes, boss. That's a great idea, boss. You know what I'm saying? And so if you'll look just underneath the subheading, I have the actual quote from General Amherst to Colonel Bouquet, just above that black and white picture there in the first color block.
Yeah, right here at the bottom. Let me make it a little bigger. Hold on.
that's it right there. And so this is from the direct letter carried to and received by Colonel Bouquet at Fort Pitt from General Amherst in 1763. So these are British military officers corresponding to one another between Amherst's command post and then to the outpost at Fort Pitt at the beginning source of the Ohio. And so Bouquet received the letter on June the 23rd, 1763. Could it not be contrived to send the smallpox among those disaffected tribes of Indians? We should use every stratagem in our power to reduce them. I just concatenated a long correspondence. It's two main sentences because
it's a lot more that he says there.
There's a lot more there, but I just cut to the heat of the meat to start it off.
Because
and then I go down in here, and the very next underneath that, you see a journal entry from William Trent. And William Trent, along with the surveyor that would survey the 7 ranges and plant that stone that I touched with my own hands yesterday. The stone that I found is about 45 miles west-southwest of the East Palestine derailment. And the beginning point of this survey is about 14 miles due south of the derailment itself. So this is the first line that was ever surveyed by the United States government in U.S. history. And it's literally the controlling survey line for every piece of property in East Palestine, because it's the original controlling survey line for the entire rest of the United States, from the Ohio River all the way to the Pacific Ocean. And that stone that I found is the oldest stone controlling the public land system in North America. Can't believe I found it, and it's still there.
I'll back up so they can see it. Where's that?
I mean, after they planted, it's right there. After they planted the stone, they actually then carved an X pattern in the top of it, and then drilled a hole at the center point of the X.
Yep, you can see
it's got moss on all 4 sides, all the way to the top.
X, and you see the hole right there.
I mean, I'm lucky to have found it, because I saw part of the orange stake laying in the ground, and I placed it back up right behind.
I'm trying to remember. Can you let them know what this is right here?
That's a pile of buffalo skulls next to the Union Pacific main line. I believe that was taken near Omaha, Nebraska.
Yeah. And can you explain to the people what is the relevance of this?
Well, the point is that by killing all of those buffalo, deliberately wasting the meat and the pelts, it was a key part of the genocidal policy to stop the free movement and livelihoods of the Great Plains tribes, which typically were nomadic. Hence, their housing method of preference was tent poles and teepee coverings. And so they would just follow these massive naked mud stripes across the prairie where the buffalo had marched in these massive herds. You know, just it's almost unimaginable to think of hundreds, if not thousands, of buffalo marching in a convoy miles long, sometimes over a mile wide itself. And then for weeks, if not months, there would be a naked scar across the prairie. And this was the beginning of many of the Great Prairie Trails. And so in order to defeat the Lakota, who had defeated the U.S. military and forced the U.S. military to sue for peace. And that's how we get the 1868 Treaty of Fort Laramie for my brothers in the Lakota Nation. I hope. We're all relatives. Or as we'd say in Cherokee, so in the context of that, the way to retaliate against the Lakota and just completely disregard that Treaty of Fort Laramie and expand beyond their trade route through the Lakota Nation, which was known as the Bozeman Trail. That's for Bozeman, Montana's name. It was the deliberate extermination of the buffalo herd used against the Lakota, which they were nearly successful. And this was merely a replay and a building upon what they had learned in fighting the Seminole, the Gullah Geechee, the Lumbee, the Yuchi, the Mashepshoki, Cherokee, Choctaw, Chickasaw, you name it. In the fact that the heart of the Cherokee economy was the buckskin. Everything at trade was valued in how many bucks it was worth. This will cost you $5. That will cost you $10. And that's always been the Cherokee economy, to trade in buckskin, because it's a real, actual fungible commodity. It's not like some fractional reserve fiat currency, or even like some meaningless paper cash currency like a dollar. That it's a buckskin. It's a deer hide you can wear or do whatever with. And even though it's the year 2023, people all across the United States and the world over still refer to U.S. dollars as bucks, going back to the Cherokee buckskin economy. And so what hampered the Cherokee and forced us, one of the many things that forced us on the Trail of Tears was starvation, because they hunted the white-tailed deer almost into extinction. And they did hunt the eastern mountain buffalo into complete extinction. The eastern mountain buffalo is as extinct as the dodo bird. And all that's left is the remnants of the plains buffalo that they've managed to breed and get back into herds and spread back to other states.
Which are your
really lost the buffalo entirely, all species.
Mm-hmm. Which are your modern day bisons. Which, when you were talking about, they use that term now. You guys ever heard the term greenbacks? That's what they're talking about. Yeah, and I wanted to point this out because a lot of people think, oh, we just beat the natives, because I'll hear some conservatives make this kind of argument. And what they did was they lost wars. They sued for peace. Peace was supposedly arranged, and then the United States or not, well, they weren't the United States at that time. The early colonies, I guess that's a better way to say it. Early colonies, or a nice way to say it, early settlers, other known as colonizers. What they did was they lied and they broke every arrangement. There's been, correct me if I'm wrong, I want to say, I think the number on record is over 400 broken treaties. And so every time that they would lose, they would sue for peace. Once the natives felt like everything was cool and copacetic and there was peace, we got our area over here, you guys are over there, they would start doing stuff like this.
I mean, just look at the current situation for our own Cherokee Nation. And since the Trail of Tears, it's been split into 3 different federally recognized tribes: the Kituwa Band, the Western Band, and the Eastern Band. And when it comes to the land situation for the Western Band and the Kituwa Band, in between Tulsa and Tahlequah, Oklahoma, that was supposed to be governed under the Treaty of Hopewell and the Treaty of New Echota. But again, those treaties weren't honored until the Supreme Court finally upheld Cherokee sovereignty over the original treaty lands, literally 3-4 years ago, when Kimberly Teehee, who was working on it. Kimberly Teehee has since been appointed by the Cherokee Nation, the Western Cherokee, to represent the Cherokee Nation in Congress per the treaty. And Nancy Pelosi refused to recognize her or seat her. And so Kimberly Teehee for the Cherokee has kind of been in the same boat as like Eleanor Holmes Norton, who is the African-American representative for the District of Columbia in Congress. that's been ignored for years. That we also have the same situation with representatives from Puerto Rico, because it just shows the hypocrisy of the United States when it comes to the rule of law. Whether they want to, in one resolution, say that they have a right to invade The Hague if the International Criminal Court ever tries to charge any U.S. service member, but they got some friends at the CIA and the National Endowment for Democracy to monitor Ukraine. Yeah. And their CIA carve-out told the ICC that Putin may be responsible for some kid abduction. So, yeah, the U.S. totally supports the ICC's indictment and arrest warrant against Vladimir Putin. But if the ICC so much as gives a stanky look to Uncle Sam, they ready to blow the Hague right off. They ready to send the Hague into the North Sea.
Yep. Then it's no longer legitimate. I see Hamza is out in the building. Hamza says, "What's up?" And Leonard, let's see, what did he say? Leonard Trust Fund says,
"What up, Trust Fund?"
Says, "Thank you, Marcus. Great Sunday gift." Yeah, I wanted to have you on here because I felt like there's a lot more that needed to be dug into as far as what's been going on with this, and I didn't feel like we were digging deep enough in this. So I wanted to have Yona on to kind of help go into some of this stuff, especially since I knew that he was on the trail. People might not think that I'm following what they're doing or watching their content and stuff, but that's part of why.
The audience, what the audience don't realize is Young Morph planned this in advance. You know what I'm saying? We've been talking about this for a while, and then things kind of crystallized over the last few weeks. And it was finally lined up for this weekend. It just so happens that I've been working on 4 different stories in the field, taking videos and writing blog, and all of a sudden, like an epiphany, not yesterday, but so today is Sunday, right? Saturday, so it was Friday night. I had the epiphany. It hit me like a flash of light. All these stories all meet at the mouth of that creek right next to East Palestine. That's where the abandoned canal is. That's where the abandoned railroad is. That's where the dioxin is. That's where the slave houses are on the Harriet Tubman Trail for Underground Rail. I mean, every part of America, every toxic, ugly part of American empire, starting with chemical biological warfare, handing out smallpox blankets to try to exterminate people, all the way to purposefully draining vinyl chloride and butyl acrylates and all this nasty into an open trench and burning it, making it 10 times worse. It all ties together. I mean, it's full circle. It's coming full circle on you, man. And that's why I put this other article immediately after Amherst orders that's given on that June 23rd. Because you look at the date of this journal entry, it's the very next day saying, yeah, we got those orders. And this is what they did. And the sad thing is, which you can read the story if word by word if you want the little blurb, but basically Shingus and Tamaqua then said, look, we're your friends. We don't want to break the chain of friendship. You know what I'm saying? We come in peace. We came here to warn you that all these massacres of our tribesmen are now going to be avenged. And we've banded up with the Six Nation Confederacy. That's the Iroquois, right? We got the Shawnee, the Piankashaws, the Eries, the Miamis, the Ashtabulas, Kickapoos, Lenapes, Delawares, Wyandottes. Everybody's ready to go, man.
And
get the fuck out. I'm telling you right now, we don't want to break chain of friendship. We came in here in peace. We're the good guys. That's why we're here at the fort talking to you all right now. Listen,
you know what county
y'all need just get the fuck out. And we told them, give y'all time to leave. And what do? They're like, well, thanks so much for being our friends. Here's some free blankets and handkerchiefs.
Yep. You know what county I grew up in, Yona? Believe it or not? Wyandotte. Wyandotte right next to, and Shawnee's right on the other side of us.
And you know why that is? Because where did the Wyandottes and Shawnees get sent to when they got kicked the fuck out of Ohio?
Kansas.
Kansas. Same thing with the Osage, right?
Well, and
the Osage tribe,
also,
people talk about the Koch brothers and the Kochtopus, right?
and the call,
oil
and
empire. Koch is how it's spelled, but it's pronounced like Coca-Cola, Coke. At the verdigris port, right there in is it Catawba? The port of Catawba? Catoosa. The port of Catoosa.
Yeah.
The port of Catoosa is the northern end of the Arkansas River navigation system. And it's basically the port of Tulsa. And that was built for the Koch brothers so they could extract, read that as steel, oil from the Osage Nation even faster. That's how they made their money. That's how Rockefeller made his money, stealing oil from the Indian lands. And Kansas,
you ever know there's a military base that was called Fort Osage?
Mm-hmm.
That's why, because that was the original people, that was the original army regiment that went in to start to steal that land because they realized the value of that land and what was up under the ground. And it's the same. Why do you think the United States is going to war or always in like messing with Venezuela? There's a reason why. It all goes back to the same thing about basically colonizers, modern day colonizers going after resources.
Mm-hmm. And even to the extent of what we see in Africa today with the refurbishment of ancient colonial rail lines that had been built, a century ago by Italy and France and Spain and Portugal and Belgium and others all across Africa, from Egypt, from Cairo to Cape Town, from the Congo all the way back across to Kenya. And of recent, really beginning in the late 1970s, China showed up in Africa, and they began with the construction of the Tazara Railway, which, of course, links Tanzania to Zimbabwe at Bengala. And there at Bengala, you can then take the Bengala Railway all the way across to the other side of Africa, to the Atlantic coast at Lobito Bay in Angola, which was a Portuguese colony. And so China was able to establish the first complete east-west rail crossing of Africa, above Madagascar, going right across Africa. And then since that time, China primarily has gone on to upgrade and build new standard gauge rail lines all across Africa. And I'm not going to go through the whole list for brevity's sake, but I do also want to mention that other countries have also participated in new imperialism, new colonialism, basically the recolonization of Africa. That's one of my songs I wrote about. And
worst offender is the French.
France, I was on the tip of my tongue. France,
or is Western
recently built
French,
high-speed rail systems for Morocco and Algeria. And for those that aren't familiar with France's history and Algeria in particular, I would compare it maybe to the U.S. occupation of South Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
Until the helicopter took off from the embassy roof, right? Then it wasn't Saigon. Then it became Ho Chi Minh City, right?
Well, you could say South Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos also,
because they were all part of the Agent Orange, which is the part that needs to be put into this story. That's the last 2% of the text, and I do have it in there. It is in there,
and that's that iconic
Agent Orange.
The iconic photo when you see them running and you see the little naked kid. That's what was going on in the fall of Saigon there. And so it's all tied in. And it's kind of funny. I wanted to throw in this little bit here because you were talking about how all these things lined up, the chemical warfare back then, chemical warfare now, whether it's intentional or accidental. It's all kind of interesting how this is me, how I'm seeing this from a spiritual lens, because I'm a Hebrew Israelite, and I delve into a lot of looking at prophecies and stuff like that. This is all kind of showing a what do they call it in film when you're dang, I'm forgetting the term, when you put something ahead, foreshadowing. The
Foreshadowing.
foreshadowing of things to come and showing it in a microcosm of these things. And I just think it's kind of interesting how it's all being laid out. And I'll wrap with you a little bit about that
Well, they
spirit.
keep telegraphing the past. I mean, well, what do you call Agent 201?
Mm-hmm.
What do you call all these silly ass World Economic Forum videos that they post up with the cheesy ass music and the whack ass graphics? You know, I mean, they literally telegraph in the past. Like, I mean, if you was on the court, you would be throwing nothing but steals.
But explain to but see, this is the part which people need to understand. There is a reason why they choreograph and why they telegraph these punches. But why? Do you know, Yona? I'm sure you probably do. Maybe you haven't thought about it, or maybe you have thought about it, but you know why they telegraph this stuff?
For one thing, well, it's just the first part of it is that different people have different perceptions of reality. And what the key distinction is that people with our perception of reality view life as more valuable than money itself. And then there's the flip side of the coin, where there are people who are incapable of acknowledging intrinsic value in anything. Or to put it as Wu-Tang would say, cash rules everything around me, dollar, dollar bill, y'all. That's all that matters. And so you have a total and complete indifference to any life that you damage or kill, be it human or any other form of life. Total and complete indifference because it ain't money. And so in that regard, it makes sense. So when these people with what I would call
you're right there.
Thinking, a psychopathic thinking where money's worth more than life itself, which is psychopathic, they then telegraph and boast of their grand ideas and plans because they have no shame. And ultimately, I think it's a facet inherent to their narcissistic nature that, like, I got so much damn money, I'm richer than Jesus. I got more drip than God himself. I ain't worried about them fools. It's all about me, baby.
Well,
it's their downfall. That's their downfall, Hebrew.
You're right. And the reason why is what people don't realize is that in ancient world, there was a god known as Mammon. Mammon is literally the worship of wealth, the worship of gold, the worship of money. And this
is what Bone Thugs call it. What Bone Thugs and Harmony call that? Oh, the love of money. Got to get that money, man. Yeah.
Or you can even go the Isley brothers. You know, people would kill their own mother for the love of money.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what this all boils down to, that money matters. And you can extrapolate that even to ancient forms. Money equates to resources. Resources equate to that's unlimited. Some people can just look at resources as natural resources, as oil, gas, diamonds, water, salt, things like that, spices, whatever. But also, that money gives you ability to control. It gives you power. And so the difference is they have put a faith in I'm trying to think of a better word than carnal, but I guess carnal was probably one of the best.
Now we're getting to the most valuable thing on planet Earth. We're almost there.
Mm-hmm. A tangible, God, a God that they can touch, feel, that has nothing to do with spirituality. It has nothing to do with a higher purpose. It has nothing to do with connection. It has nothing to do with a respect for the earth, a love for the earth, a value in life itself.
And see, that's when we need to check our perceptions. It's good to involve yourself in different circles of friends and have your own perceptions challenged to receive input from different perspectives. Again, it's a way to enhance your diversity of reality and how you have always perceived reality. When you go, I didn't know any people thought like that. I don't agree with it, but now that I know that people, it enriches my ability to analyze and synthesize more things that I hear about, because now I can take that into context since as I was exposed to their point of view and perspective, you see, rather than being in an echo chamber where everybody's just saying the same damn thing. Everybody's shaking pom-poms when they need to, and then when they come on and do the 5 minutes of hate for Emmanuel Goldstein, everybody's like, yeah, fuck him.
Well, the thing is, people can't fathom that people would do things outside of the things that they would do and people around them that could do. So if you're around people that, let's take racism, that they're not racist, they would never do a racist thing, you may have a hard time fathoming that people would do racist stuff. If you would never, going even worse, if you would never commit murder, if you would never be a serial killer and desecrate people's bodies and do all this other weird, heinous, just wicked stuff, then sometimes it could be hard for you to fathom a reality that somebody else would do. If you would never decide to, I don't care about the environment. I don't care if this kills 1 million people over there because I do X. As long as I'm good, because you wouldn't do that, it's hard for you to fathom that there are people who would. And the reason you're right on everything you said there, but the one little puzzle piece that I'll put that'll lock this all together is they need for you to be susceptible to what's possible. That way, it's less pushback to when it happens. For instance, you take somebody.
It's also referred to as predictive programming.
Yes.
So you're desensitized to this traumatic dystopia that you've already been prepared for. You've been led up the slaughter chute by that Judas goat, kept in line the whole time by sheepdogs patrolling to keep the stragglers and get the stragglers back in line. Just keep nose to butthole all the way up the slaughter chute, and y'all gonna make some fine clothes and some fine mutton. You know what I'm saying?
Not that I have any interest in cooking a frog, but if a person was cooking a frog, how do you cook a frog, Yona?
You just slowly turn that water from cold to boiling. And my God, the United States looks like a hot tub right now. Shout out to the Texas Christian University
bullfrogs,
horned frogs.
Yeah, horned frogs. And that's what people don't realize. We're in the water, and they're slowly just turning up the heat a little bit. And what happens is when that frog starts, wait a minute, get a little uncomfortable. Oh, we'll turn it down just a little bit.
I think we hit that boiling moment of epiphany just a few days into the lockdown, because I think that was the biggest mistake. A lot of mistakes have been made by the evil ones. I'm just going to call them the evil ones, like my mama would call them. The biggest mistake the evil ones made is taking all of the Americans that are just kept at the knife's cutting edge of economic desperation, with almost no savings in the account. That's reality for most people. You live day to day, week to week, paycheck to paycheck, bill to bill, constantly. It's like the old Greek story of the sword of Damocles hanging over the king's throne by a single horse's hair. And if you do anything crazy or even speak too loud, that hair's going to snap and the sword's going to cut your head off. So with great power comes great responsibility. But when you live in the bubble where you're always taken care of, you may have had sausage or not, but you got no idea how it's made. Never been on a boar hunt, never slaughtered a pig. You're in such a complete and totally different reality. And that's why, like, probably my favorite house remix I've ever made would be the song The Greatest, which features Carl Cox's Dr. Funk, the greatest of all time, I'm talking about the one and only GOAT, Muhammad Ali. No one alive since has ever talked trash more poetically and in full command as Muhammad Ali. He could straight be roasting your ass with the worst insults, and you can't stop laughing because it's just so damn clever and funny. And in that video is James Baldwin, again, the black author I was talking about, who explains this whole thing about perception and how you perceive reality. So, let's say if you're in Tidewater, Mississippi, and you grew up in the master's house because the master was your daddy, and it's going to be your farm to run one day. I said, now hold on, son. You live in Foghorn Leghorn land. And so to hear the black folk talking bad on the police and what we got here in town, just unimaginable. How could you be contrary to this wonderful system? I mean, and Mammy, she's so good to me. I love black people. I mean, my Mammy that raised me with all her pickaninny, she was so good to me and make the best sweet tea. So racist that they can't even see how racist they are because it's ubiquitous like water. That's what James Baldwin tries to explain in my remix in that song.
Yeah.
But because, and then for the black child, they're like, I've pledged my life, my name, my livelihood, my very existence, how I perceive everything to exist is pledged to this country that has no place for me. And everything that I ever do will be written out of existence. And my entire family's history and genealogy was robbed and taken from me before I'm born. And my own history and story will probably be robbed and taken from me and never even given to my children. And that prophecy plays out in so many broken homes, poor homes across the United States, especially Native American and African American and Appalachian American. Because to me, the greatest success that the American empire can claim has been in convincing humanity across the world that humanity is definable by the pigmentation of your skin, and that all of humanity's tribes can just merely be disambiguated into white, black, yellow, brown, or red. That was invented by the British in response to the successful rebellion led by Nathaniel Bacon and his Army of the Poor on July the 4th, 1676, in Tidewater, Virginia, just after the establishment of the Jamestown colony, when you had poor indentured servants from Ireland, poor imported black slaves, poor Indians, even women, all hand to hand, arm to arm, pitchfork, fire and fire, all working together to burn down masters' plantations' houses. And they ran out the land gentry aristocracy. And there for a short time, in the earliest days of American history, there was actually American democracy and equality in Virginia. Well, it took a couple of months because there wasn't internet at that time, but once word got to England, what had happened? The response was swift and punishing. And then they responded with legislation establishing for the first time ever, this is what a white person is. This is what a black person is. This is what a red person is. White and black are not allowed to marry. Red and black are not allowed to cohabitate. They did all these separation laws and wrote them into the laws of the Commonwealth of Virginia per the House of Burgesses. Those laws prohibiting interracial marriage and cohabitation, they were on the books of Virginia until the 1970s, man. This isn't ancient history, man. It was successful for over 300 years. And now it's convinced people that even though when they do their genealogy and their family came from Ireland and they spoke Gaelic, or their family came from France and they spoke French, or their family came from Sweden and they spoke Swedish, or their family came from Italy and they spoke Italian, oh, now they're all just white. And in Europe, I guess Whoopi Goldberg would just say, Europe is just all honkies. That's bullshit, man. That's not how genealogy works. That's not how Europe describes itself. It's just as ridiculous to say that Africa is just all black people. Excuse the fuck out of me. Coptics are not the same as Egyptians. Zulu are not the same as Wolof. Hutus are not the same as Tutsis. They live in the same country, Rwanda. And within Rwanda, Hutus and Tutsis, they ain't the same. Right?
You're pissed off with that Egyptian and Coptic there because they be trying to pretend that the Coptics are the original Egyptians. And when that's obviously not clear because there's a language change there. I mean, there's so much.
Coptics are in Nubia. They're in Nubia, not in Egypt. Nubia's a different kingdom. You know that.
Yeah. But think about when they came. Well, a lot of people, they like to gloss over this part of when the Greek Empire started coming into Northern Africa and started doing their thing. And they also forget that just like how America is now and certain parts of Europe are now where they're not homogenous, where they're multicultural. The same thing was Rome was like that also in Europe. It wasn't just a bunch of white people throughout the Roman Empire. It did have various people from various parts of the world. The same way with Greece, the same way with
Cairo. Cairo was like the Miami of the Egyptian Empire in that you had all kinds of people speaking Greek, writing in Greek. The infamous Library of Alexandria that was lost to fire. Most of the great works in that library were written in Greek, not hieroglyph.
It was intentionally destroyed to fire.
Right.
Because
intentionally burned.
If you go into that Library of Alexandria, I guarantee you it would have started showing the histories of the people who were there before the Greeks, going into the Minoans and the Mycenaeans and the battles that happened there, and when the modern day Greeks came in from Macedonia, and before they were in Macedonia, when they the Library of Alexandria had so much. And the only reason why we know a lot of this stuff is because other areas around recorded information that you could piece together stuff that that they would have had to have known.
Well, take for example biblical research. You know, my freshman year of collegiate study was with the Benedictine monks at the Arch Abbey of St. Meinrad up in Spencer County, Indiana, near Evansville. Go Hoosiers. But our mascot was the Ravens. So go Ravens. And that's where I started my broadcasting career at WRSM Radio St. Meinrad AM 690 with yours truly, Yona. Anyhow,
that makes sense. Almost makes sense now. That makes sense. You do have the radio voice. I never caught it, but
I started out as a radio DJ, and now I'm a DJ with an actual Pioneer and 2 turntables. That's what's up. So, you know, at the studying theology, and then later when I completed the associate's degree at St. Catherine's, taking Old Testament and New Testament, and having studied, you know, I can read some Hebrew. Of course, I can read and write and understand Arabic. But when I was at St. Meinrad, that was before I was in the Army. When I then finished my associates, that was after I got my DD-214 and my honorable discharge. And so with that under my wing, now I went back and started reading these old texts, you know, from the Septuagint, which is where the original Old Testament books are collected and all transcribed into Greek. And so it's like the first standardized translation, which would later kind of be copied in ways with the Gutenberg standard translation. And then you see another standard translation with the King James Version. But what's interesting is about the Library of Alexandria, there's no doubt that there was all types of different gospel accounts there, for example, that would have been heretical. And so, like, take, for example, today, if you compare the Protestant Bible to the Roman Catholic Bible, well, the Roman Catholic Bible includes what are considered heretical texts in the form of the Deuterocanonical Addendum, which is extra books to the Book of Daniel and the Apocryphal books, and some other heresies like, you know, the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Mary,
the Gospel of Judas. Yeah, I know.
Yeah. So it's just hard to imagine how much was lost in that library.
And then some of that was considered heretical, but the Apocrypha was just basically considered deuterocanonical. For those who are getting lost in the weeds with some of the stuff we're talking about, deuterocanonical is stuff which they consider secondary canon. And it's considered that it is good for historical references, but they do not consider it priority for the gospel. And so the church decided, yeah, we don't think this stuff is fake, but we don't think it's important. So the Protestant church decided you don't really need any of this. Doesn't mean that it's false. But
and then whatever the Protestants didn't get rid of, when the Protestants and the Catholics wouldn't cooperate to the king's whims and desires, King James just created the Anglican Church out of whole cloth so he could get his divorce.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's the worms there.
And now people are like, and now what version of the Bible are you using, Yona? Are you using the one and only official version, the King James version? I'm like, man, fuck King James. He's a punk.
Well, and what people don't realize is King James himself, all he did was commission for the scholars to do it. And so he took some Hebrew scholars, some Greek scholars, and people who spoke English, and they're basically translating the Septuagint, the Dead Sea Scrolls, and things like that into English. So I mean,
but then he had the final cut and said, "That's got to go." That's
well,
and so actually, the King James version, I would say, is the most abridged form of the Holy Bible you can find today. It has more things taken out of it than any other version of the Bible you ever read.
Well, depends on which King James. Are you talking about the King James 1611, or if you're
talking about the KJV is 1611, the official writ?
Because that one's pretty close to the Septuagint. But it's the ones that came directly after that.
No, I'm not talking about the actual translations that are included in the King James version. I'm talking about all of the content that was edited out and left in clippings in the floor of the king's castle by his experts who were doing this. So, like the secondary canons and doxologies, collectively referred to as the deuterocanonical heresies, all that was yeeted. And then certain passages were yeeted as well. So, it is, when you go to particularly to the Old Testament and the Septuagint stuff, it's more true to form in Old Testament. But, of course, most of the deuterocanonical and other writings and Acts of the Apostles and all these other Gospels that come in are New Testaments. And so it's really in the New Testament, as presented by the King James Version, that we see the most outright, just blanket omission and censorship. It's really staggering when you compare it to the earlier forms of the Bible. And so for biblical scholars, the King James Version is more like the King James edit than even like a version, because so much is withheld from it that's found in other Bibles. That it is relevant to me. If you're going to study the Bible, to me, the more ancient texts you can get your hands on, the more context that those texts present to your understanding of the spirituality of the day. You know what I'm saying?
Well, what I would say is that as far as edited, like certain things, for instance, like where Easter is put in versus Pesach or Passover, and for like the counts of like for Luke and Matthew, where there's variations there. It's because the amount of manuscripts that they were given so many for Matthew and so many for Luke, and they're trying to, you could tell where somebody's trying to make this fit and work. And so you could say the overall account is correct, but every detail, that goes into textual criticism. And so, I mean, and which people don't realize, I do engage in textual criticism when I'm dealing with, people who are more knowledgeable about the ins and outs of it. But there's a good amount of it. And it also makes a difference if you're dealing with the Texas Sinaiticus, the Latin Vulgate, and those different variations, what you're reading and what you're going from.
I'm not going to lie. I am prejudiced when it comes to biblical study. For some reason, reading Bible verses in modern standard English is just it doesn't light a fire in my soul. It has to be in the old Shakespearean type language, or in the Latin Vulgate, or in the Greek, or in the Arabic.
Well, I see liberties with everything that came out of any Bible that is written after, say, the 1750s.
Mm-hmm.
And I see
into the Moravian period and the missionaries spreading out. Yeah.
You see where somebody is pushing. This is somebody who already has a preconceived notion of things and is intentionally translating things to what they inconvenient things to what they want.
And it was aggressive too, Marcus. I mean, because this is what led to these Chautauqua movements and these huge moving church revivals, tent revivals that spread out across the country beginning in the late 18th century. You know, with I mean, you know, the only thing I could compare it to in today's modern context would maybe be like Jehovah's Witnesses, but that's typically just, you know, a pair of people knocking at the door. This is like a Barnum and Bailey type.
But I look
extravaganza, you know.
But in all honesty, most of these, whether you're talking about Church of Latter-day Saints, you're talking about Baptist, Lutheran, all of these different people, you're basically formed off of the tree of Protestant anyway, because you're literally going with the interpretation of the early Protestant fathers. You're literally everything that they're the main things. You might change and say, well, we believe this one thing here, or we're going to do this one thing different. But like, for instance, like things like the Trinity and about, free will, and a lot of these different things are all the virgin birth. All of these things are all coming. Well, that goes all the way back to the Holy Catholic Church.
Well, you know, and they're probably the most aggressive in terms of Christian religion. These sects are the most aggressive in terms of taking to heart the words in the Bible to go forth and spread the gospel and proselytize and convert the heathens to Christianity. So whether it's the Mormon focus on putting their members into missions and sending Mormon missionaries within the United States and all across the world to proselytize and make converts. The same with the what's it called? Is it the Watchtower Society? Yeah, with the Jehovah's Witnesses, which is their publication and their organization, where again they feel commanded by God in their soul to literally go out and convert as many people to their form of Christianity as a command from God, much more so than perhaps, you know, just regular Episcopalians or Catholics or Baptists. Not that they don't have missions themselves. I'm just saying that the Mormons and Jehovah's Witnesses in particular distinguish themselves in their zeal for proselytizing and bringing more converts into their religion, so much so that it's often a point of discussion. Whereas I would think like the Cherokee, Katuah, Nighthawk Society, and other forms of Native American spirituality are almost the complete opposite. And instead, it's often people wanting to find out about it and coming to the reservation or approaching me or others and saying, I want to learn about this. Whereas I've never gone to anybody's door and knocked and said, would you like to learn about Yehovah and Galan?
Well, this is what I would say. If you're going from the understanding and interpretation of basically, because think about it, because we've got to like set a table real quick. When the Roman Empire, which pushed forth Christianity through Catholicism, when they started doing this came after 70 AD, when they literally went into Israel and took the manuscripts and things like that and started to convert it to, this is our faith now. This is our religion.
It was a stroke of genius for Caesar Constantine to realize that this fledgling religion was uniting different factions of opposition that traditionally bickered amongst one another and uniting them all against Rome, as Christianity was quickly becoming a uniting rebellion to Rome itself. So, in a turn of absolute genius, Emperor Constantine goes to the Bosporus, that water corridor that connects the Black Sea to the Aegean Sea and the Mediterranean at large, where Istanbul is located today. And he renamed the city Constantinople after himself, after he had himself baptized there, and then moved the seat of Rome to Constantinople, where later, after the collapse of the Roman Empire, the Byzantine Empire would rise from its ashes in the very same place. But by having himself baptized as a Christian, the Caesar of the Roman Empire then basically took something that was perceived as being a rebellious act to be anti-Roman by practicing Christianity and sketching the shape of the fish into the dirt with your sandal silently to know when you're amongst Christians, right? That's why we have the fish symbol, right? Where you would make the two arcs with your sandal and silently in the dirt to find out if you're with cool people or not. And all of a sudden now, well, if you're Christian, you're a bona fide official Roman. So by Constantine having himself baptized Christianity, he was able to completely co-opt
that's exactly what he did,
and make it into a Roman citizenship quality, and then kind of blend in different heresies to make it part of a Roman culture thing, which from its inception was something completely different.
Yeah. Well, and it's great that you put that in there, that you brought that up, because a lot of people realize that I personally, from my readings and understandings on Constantine, I don't believe he ever truly converted. No. I don't believe he ever did. I think he found it as a vehicle. And the reason why is
because we would call what he did virtue signaling.
Yes. I mean, Constantine, I believe, and when you talked about that, he saw how it was uniting these different factions of people. The Romans did not look as the different tribes of Israel as different. Sorry, I mixed that up. They looked at them as different, not knowing that historically these are all descend from the same people. So they looked at these different tribes as three different groups of people being brought together, and the surrounding nations, which some of them went in, they married into the family and all that. So they're seeing this group that's not very homogenous, looks like a bunch of different people. They looked at them as a bunch of different groups of people being brought together and being driven by this hardcore faith. And
what's it all about, Marcus? It really comes down to faith and obedience. This is all about faith and obedience, because when the Roman Empire was fighting Christianity and you're a person of faith, you're obedient to God first. Who cares what Caesar says? Jesus already told us, just give unto Caesar what is Caesar and stay real with me, big G up above. Well, the state of Rome could not have people worshiping anything but Rome. They had to find a way to get people to worship God and Rome at the same time. Hello, Vatican. What's that? What's that? What's up, Vatican City? What y'all doing over there?
A lot of people like to go to the Nicene Council, thinking that that's where the Bible was formed. The Bible was not formed during the Nicene Council. The Bible was actually formed through the Council of Hippo-Carthage in North Africa. It was like the first official Bible being put together in that area. Ironically, Hippo-Carthage, North Africa, is really not very far, especially back in those days of transport, to Ethiopia.
I'm going to call the Council of Nicaea. What was I going to call them? Like the Council of Nicaea was basically like the Smith-Munt Modernization Act for the Roman Empire, where they took the tenets of Christian catechism and completely warped them and bent them into the shape of ideal Roman citizenship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and
it was
combined it with Roman citizenship in order to so fully co-opt it that you could not be a Christian and be anti-Roman, because to be Christian is to be completely Roman. And that's how he co-opted it. And so we see the same tactic being played today across many different ideologies,
but
to get people to buy in to it. But then when you buy into it, this new form, it's not what it originally was. Like another example would be like with Black Lives Matter. There's no question people can take it into their heart, into their soul, into that place where you pray with God and understand what Black Lives Matter speaks to. But when you look at where the movement was taken by certain organizers and manipulated,
it's the same thing.
They just made it something their own. They pulled a Constantine move.
Yeah.
They formed up their own little Nicaea council, and everybody got paid. And who cares about the message? Fuck all y'all. It's about me.
Yeah.
And it said, and you know, to me, the commonality, to me, I always like to say Black Rock Lives Matter, because ultimately, if I want to call out the man by name, the man is Black Rock. The man is Vanguard. First and middle and last names, and whether they're the Esquire or the third or the fourth or the fifth, they don't fucking matter. That's the man right there. Who, you know, Berkshire Hathaway, majority owned by Black Rock and Vanguard. And Warren Buffett at Berkshire Hathaway then gets to tell Burlington Northern Santa Fe what the fuck to do, because they own them. So you know, when farmers are trying to get their fertilizer so they can do their planting across the Bible Belt breadbasket of the country, and they can't get fertilizer up the rail line, because Warren Buffett said, we're doing something else right now. Did those other two Cessnas crash into the chicken houses today? Okay, let's cut fertilizer shipments by another 20%. I mean, we can see what's going on, man.
Yeah,
you're not dumb. The audience is not dumb. You know, I give people credit for their intelligence and abilities to see what the fuck is going on. Pardon my language.
No, you're good. Like I tell people, I said the one thing which they don't factor in, one of the biggest things is they don't factor. Well, for one, what the message of the and I like to go before Bible, before Christianity, because Christian was a name which they threw on them at first as meaning a derogatory term. They were Israelites before that, and they had the Bible basically was not only just some faith thing. The laws of the Bible were literally the laws of their land. It was how they governed. It was a theocracy in a sense. And I don't think a lot of people get that.
My goodness, and that dates back to the Sumerians and the Babylonians, where they're literally codifying their religious law, carving it into stone using the cuneiform text, right? Now we're talking about like Code of Hammurabi and shit. You know, the oldest.
Yeah, people don't get
stone tablets, and again, we're talking theocracy.
Thou shalt not kill. Thou shalt not steal. Idolatry. All of those were literal law. Like, I know this gets a bad name, but something like, for instance, Sharia law, it's the same thing. And if you go back into the earlier beliefs of what it was before, in the Mosaic law, there is a respect for the land. There is a respect for how you're supposed to. I mean, there's literal laws on how you're supposed to, on how you're supposed to treat the land, on how you're supposed to have dealings with your brother, how you're supposed to deal with the other nations, how you're supposed to deal with a widow, how you're supposed to deal with all of these different things. And it goes into holistic things, which a lot of people don't know about. And that part, there is a lot of comparison, which you could say, to native culture. That part there, you know, but that
I
part,
tell you, it's a challenge
that
sometimes
that
to
part
find
is,
the grace in every day, like you're talking about, Marcus, to find that grace, to find that
mhm.
inspiration. But we really are winning. I mean,
Well, that
it's
part was
inspiring to me, the developments that are coming to place, and the people that are waking up to this reality. You know,
well.
better late than never. But
That's
I
what
really do
people.
feel like that
We'll see. We'll see.
there's a point where some people can be bullshitted too much. Even some of my relatives that got every single medical procedure and injection whenever told, they even reached their limit and
Like
said,
I,
I done got 5 of them. I'm not getting another one. So
like I.
even, I mean, it's possible. It inspires me.
But here's the thing about it. It literally says, um, narrow is the path to salvation, and broad is the path to destruction. So everybody's not going to get it. It's only for a small faction to get it. And when that small faction gets it, then the prophecies will start to work in alignment. And then, like I tell people all the time, it's going to get a lot worse before it gets a lot better. But in the end, there will be what even the most aggressive, most militant Hebrew Israelite that you will see on the streets. What we ultimately are shooting for is that end day when there's peace on earth and everything is
And
ruled.
you got right to what's in my heart, because I'm sitting here telling myself, the biggest thing that Yona and Young Morph have in common is that we're warriors for peace, because we're people of spiritual faith. We're warriors for peace. So what does that mean in practicality? Okay, we have the ability to dream of peace that others can never imagine. Because there's always been people that would say, man, red and blue will never be cool. Bloods and Crips will never make the peace. Sunnis and Shias will never see eye to eye. There will never be diplomacy again with Iran and Saudi Arabia. That's all I ever hear from the haters, Buck Nasty and the rest of them. hate. But for people of spirit, they know that peace is always possible. And it takes the ability to dream, to let your soul fire, your light so shine that you blind everyone else's inability to imagine beyond this reality. To be able to dream of and see crystal clear what it could be, what it should be, not what the fuck it is. And so that's the difference between people who just spin their wheels and everyone nod their head like, yeah, it is fucked up. Yeah, it's fucked up too. Yeah, it's fucked up too. All right, I'll holler at you later. It's like, all that motherfucker ever do is but bitch. And I agree with his bitch, but all he ever says, what's wrong? But then you got the dreamers, the people of spirit and vision, who constantly thinking, what's another way to solve this? There's another way to skin this cat too. Like I think of like Fred Hampton and the Black Panther Party in Chicago, when they find out in their community these kids are waking up hungry in the morning. They ain't got no breakfast. We got a whole bunch of kids can't get their math lessons figured out. They can't get their science lessons figured out. So we're going to make our own spaces. We're going to bag up our own breakfasts and lunches and take them to all the kids in all of our elementary school, grade school kids all across South Chicago. And then we're going to set up tutoring and find tutors to help our students do better in school. Because if they can get a better education and stay in school, and they're going to be able to learn better if they have breakfast and lunch. I mean, that's the inspiration for today's United States Department of Agriculture free and reduced school meal program. Came from the Black Panthers. Why? Because they said we will take care of our own people. We will take care of our own community. We will be the help for our own humanity. And that's the common lesson that can be taken away in every city, every county, every town, every nation. Democracy is possible with a small d when you keep it local. As soon as it gets big and bigger and bigger, it immediately outgrows the democratic britches and takes on the task of overseer. And pretty soon it's got a Latin name like Cincinnatus and plays a mean banjo. And I'm bringing all the other plantation owners to hear this one. It's the best one I've trained yet. You know, and that's what we are. And some people realize it. So, you know, like Dave Chappelle had that moment when everybody in the media was like, oh my God, Dave Chappelle's lost his mind. Turned down all that money and just ran off to Africa all crazy and shit. You remember how people were hating on Dave Chappelle, right? Finally, the day came. He sat down with what's its name on the actor studio. You know, that guy on the actor studio that interviews all the actors with the comb over hair. Actor's masterpiece on arts and entertainment. That's what it is.
Okay.
That guy. And Dave Chappelle goes on there. And it's the first time he finally answers what the fuck happened. Everybody's wondering, man, what happened, Dave? Why Dave Chappelle fell off? He's like, man, they tell me I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that. I gotta do a movie dressed as a woman and all this shit. I said, I ain't doing that. And y'all keep your money. I don't need your money. And I just had to get away from it all. So I just left. Fuck yeah.
Yep.
Life was more important than money. And still to this day, there's people that can't wrap their fucking head around that. Because Wu-Tang just won't stop playing in their head. Cash rules everything around me. Green, dollar bill. That's all it is. You know, and it's a spell that's affected, you know, Cherokees and other natives on the reservation getting casino money. It's affected players and pimps and ballers in the hood. It's affected essays and batos in the barrios. It's affected, you know, bootleggers and moonshine kings in the mountains and the trailer parks. Because America, Uncle Sam wants you to be just like him.
Well, this is what
a miniature conquistador, to view the world through the capitalist lens, to chase that dollar, get that money, get that fame. You don't have to be real. You just got to play the game, right?
Well, everything starts in the heart, right? And the heart is the what? The heart is your mind. And so in order for you to be a colonizer, that colonizing authoritarian mindset has to be in you. And then the actions lead forth after that. One thing I do want to say, I want to put this out here, this definition, so people understand it. When they see stuff like devil in the Bible, this is not some little pitchfork guy who's all red and all that. Devil goes back to the word diablos, which means deceiver. The deceiver, that's who the devil is. So not necessarily even a spiritual deity that we're talking about when we're talking about a devil. When these people in Hollywood say, I sold my soul to the devil, you got to understand what they're saying, really what they're saying. They're saying they sold their soul to basically a demonic entity walking around as a human being, a devil, a deceiver, a liar. When you go to the word Satan, Hashatan, what that means is the adversary. That person is the adversary, the great adversary. And it says this world was given unto Satan, basically. This word is given unto the adversary. So therefore, it's not going to be ruled in righteousness. It's going to be ruled in the wickedness. Now, that said, we gave you guys the good part and the hope. One thing I do have to put out there, though, is we are going to have to go through some trying times. It is going to get a lot worse before it gets better. I just want to put that out there and not gloss over that. There are prophecies that still have to come to pass. And after these prophecies, after certain things goes, then we can have this society and all truth will be revealed when we will be given the knowledge of how things are supposed to be done. For instance, we just saw in Africa how there's a rock which gives electricity. You don't think some of these ancient societies knew that and were using this technology? There was a way to do it instead of the way which is done now. There's so many ways to do things, but because the people who are in charge now, the way they have a wicked mindset, they only know how to do things in this negative aspect.
I mean, my goodness, look how consciousness
Money.
and this Overton window has been moved just by certain geologists putting forth the theory of the catastrophic glacial floods like occurred from Glacial Lake Powell, which today the remnant is the Great Salt Lake in Utah, or the Great Lake Missoula flood, which created the scablands of the Columbia River Plateau between Spokane, Washington, and Portland, Oregon. You know, the geologists that pushed forth that theory just some 50 years ago were completely lambasted as absolutely absurd. Now it's accepted fact. There's now scientific consensus. Just in these short few decades, you know, we've seen the same with Graham Hancock and others talking about the recent archaeological evidence that's been brought forth from dig sites at Tiwanaku and the Paracas Stones and Sacsayhuaman and Cusco, you know, the Incan ruins, Machu Picchu, and more recently with the excavations at Göbekli Tepe in Turkey and carbon dating, which is showing these things are not a matter of a few thousand years old. They're finding sites and stones and inscriptions that have been masoned and carved that are tens of thousands of years old. So this entire myopic active view of human technology and advancement for too damn long has been focused on just a short time period within a small portion of the earth called Europe, in just a few languages spoken by the paler skinned. But in fact, human history is so much more broad and diverse, spread across so many different continents and so many different millennia, that more and more evidence is unearthed every day that challenges the myopic, blinder view that so many academics in their ivory towers continue to exert. And that's why, again, I can't express enough gratitude to the inspiration of Dr. Gerald Horne and others, and Dr. Cornell West, and my good friend Thomas Belt and Ed Fields, my teachers in the Eastern and Western Cherokee, for inspiring me to challenge constantly, to be even more impolite, to come even harder with the ugliest facts, to upset people's apple carts, and to bring my perspective to be as challenging as possible to other perspectives, because I at no time have ever, nor will I ever attempt to speak for all of the clans of the Cherokee, much less all of the members of my own clan, much less all of the different bands of the Cherokee, much less all of the different First Nations all across Indian country. Everything that I share, that I've learned, I freely share with others, because they may meet other Cherokees in their life, or they may not. That being said, I may be the first and maybe the only opportunity in some people's circle of friends to ever be exposed to OCO, Wado, That's 4 words in the Cherokee language. Most Americans know the last 2. Most Americans are unfamiliar with OCO. That means greetings. Wado means thank you. Means yes in Cherokee. Means no in Cherokee. And you'd be surprised. I would venture to say virtually every single American citizen knows that and mean yes and no. But how many know it's Cherokee? 0.1% of 1%. So that's what it's like to be alive, even in the language, even today, and to be used constantly. and yet still completely invisible. And that's what I think is shared by what I refer to collectively as the lower caste. And that's why I named my show the Peasants Podcast, Hi Yona, with the lower caste. Because we see the real and we live the real from the ground up, whether we're barefoot in the trailer park or whether we can feel the heat bleeding through the bottom of our sneakers on the blacktop in the projects on a hot day in August playing ball on the blacktop, or whether you're in a reservation just surrounded by the smell of people sweating the alcohol out their pores because they're all so damn alcoholic. You know, you ever been around an alcoholic? They don't even have to have beer on them, and they literally smell like a fucking beer can because it's coming out their sweat glands. And they just stink like alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the reality for the lower caste. They all experience the harshness and the ugliness and the messiness of reality. You know, we confront life and death on the streets every day. Right? Tupac is not singing about just to party in California. Tupac's bringing the real, to live and die in LA. And the reality of death. And that's the thing about the genocidal nature of the American empire. The most toxic characteristic there is. The most deranged range of Uncle Sam is his genocidal nature. So how does he get away with it? You know, I mean, my gosh, Margaret, there's people in protesting in France, people protesting in the Netherlands. When are people in the United States all just going to, you know, pop off? I mean, what's it going to take? But again, it's because of that perception of reality. So for people that still have the bubble of comfort, that still get a lot of things took care of for them, they don't know the ugliness of police brutality. And maybe they've never been, because again, you see people change when all of a sudden, now my son is gay. So now I think different about the gays, right? Well, I was always in support of the police till they pulled me out my pickup truck and beat the shit out of me. You know, I mean, it's always, I wasn't even worried about it. It wasn't even on my radar until it personally affected me or somebody I personally love. That's a friend or family member, right? And again, that's because living in these bubbles, these perceptions of reality. And that's why I think the spirit is the greatest threat to the state. And the state recognized that threat by banning group worship. Congregational worship was banned during the lockdown. Unless y'all wanted to meet at the adult sex toy store, then you all could certainly form a prayer circle around the dildo aisle. But you couldn't do it in a church. I'm not making this up, man.
No, I know.
And I got nothing against dildos or sex shops. I'm just saying, look at who they targeted. And think about what the most valuable thing on this planet is, Marcus Cage.
Mm-hmm.
When the ship is sinking and going down, what do all the grown adults scream on the ship as they start loading up lifeboats? Save the women and children first. And who have they come after with the latest medical technologies? The women and the children. You know, the Japanese bioaccumulation study already showed the proliferation and accumulation of lipid nanoparticles, which are the delivery vehicle for their new technology, into the ovaries and testes in particular. Which is, and so it was kind of weird, like, why is this? They told me the medicine just go away. They just put it in your arm and it's go away. No, it don't go away. Secondly, why is it concentrating in a female's ovaries and a man's nuts? What's going on with that? Well, now Denmark has stepped up. believe it was Denmark and Germany, both stepped up and found out that in a study of mice, maternal mice given new artificially manufactured modified RNA. Because see, people are getting confused between two different terms that mean two different things. There's two kinds of mRNA. There's modified ribonucleic acid, and I'm trying to
hold on that one. Well,
I'm trying to get to Spain. I'm just talking about terms, not endorsing or rejecting anything.
Well,
one is modified, the other one is messenger, right? And the messenger RNA is natural, the other one is enhanced. So what we've reached the point
what I was going to say is,
go ahead.
I want to have you expand on that, but we got to do that one on the Rock Fan. That way you can clearly, because we're still on YouTube on this one.
No, I don't think I've said anything that is contrary.
Well, I know.
And I'm careful to that because I respect you. You know what I'm saying?
You know how they get when you start talking mRNA. Not that I disagree.
But it was the mouse study that found that the mother mouse in the offspring, it intensified from the second litter to the third litter to the fourth litter, that by the time of the fifth litter, every single egg that was fertilized from that mouse had the exact same new genetic code that it didn't have before it received its special treatment. And so what they've now established is, number one, these things are concentrating in your sex, your gonads, right? Your sex organs. And then it's literally concentrating in the sex organs because it's going through, and every single undeveloped spermatozoa and every single undeveloped egg is going through every single one of those and rewriting the code of every single one. So now, anytime a man and a woman join their DNA, form something, if either one of them has had a new code, new software, the software is in every single one of their offspring.
Yeah, I figured that's a good note to kind of stop it on, because I mean, that's a whole nother topic we have to go really in depth in. And I don't even
know why I even went there, and I apologize for that.
Yeah, no. I don't want to do an injustice to the topic and not deeper onto it. But you said something that I figured I'll end my statement on this, and then you let everybody know where they can contact you, where they can get everything. You know the self-promotion plugs. But I wanted to put this out because you said something that it made me trigger something. And you start talking about the churches and stuff, and you were going in that, and I wanted to put this out here. I'm gonna give one scripture. I'm not gonna give you guys a whole sermon, but it's one scripture that I felt like I wanted to bring up. So let me share my screen and show you it all. I got Revelations 14:8.
Oh, snap.
And Revelations 14:8. And there followed another angel saying, Babylon is fallen, the great city, because she had made all nations drink of the wine of the wrath of her fornications. Now, that's not talking about fornication as in sex, but that's talking about how all of these nations basically were in bed with this great nation. Mm-hmm. In this great nation or great city that it is talking about here. Let's just ask anybody, where on earth, which place can you name on earth that you feel like has their authority into damn near every country, is affecting the politics of every single country, is guiding what's going on in damn near every single country, either directly or indirectly? Who has exported their culture to every part of the world? Who has exported their values to every part of the world? And who has even went into some of these areas, now have people in the furthest reaches of Africa or Asian dressing just like they do? Which nation would that be? Which nation, in fact, which nation's currency is considered the world's backup reserve currency? It's only one place that can be. Only one place. And for me, it's pretty clear when it talks about this Babylon, this is talking about mystery Babylon. And so Babylon is where we are right now. And right here is saying that city's going to fall. So be prepared for the fall. That's what I say.
I mean, and you got to think, at the time this was actually written, all across the Roman Empire, Babylon was Rome at that time. And it was it was just simply unimaginable to ever even consider that Rome would ever fall to Vandals or be sacked by Huns at the time, you know, the Acts of the Apostles were written. And yet it happened. But I really do think, particularly when you get into some of the other unsealing of the seals, get toward the end of Revelations, you know, because at first blush, when I first read the book of Revelations in its entirety in my freshman theology course with Dr. Uricu, you know, I just thought it was talking about Rome.
Well,
it wasn't until I got into the 5th and 6th and 7th seals that this is way more than Rome, because it kept speaking of a plurality. Rome was not really a plurality or an alliance of other nations. Rome was a very singular freaking empire. And everything that was taken into Rome became Rome. It didn't become the new state of Philistia or the new state of Thessalonia. It's part of fucking Rome now, man. And it's kind of the same way with the U.S. empire, in that there are parts that have been taken into the U.S. empire, but the plurality it's spoken to of, like in this case, drinking the wine of fornication, that would be like getting all these other countries to join up with NATO and getting all these partners in Europe to help the United States attack Russia while the United States is blowing up Europe's infrastructure. So, I mean, it's like, all right, Europe, we're going to show Russia. Here, stand right there. Pat, hey, what'd you punch me in the mouth for? Well, I had to blow up that pipeline, right? It's like, man, that's my mouth, man. You punching me in the mouth. You're supposed to be punching Putin. Not punching Schultz. What's his name? Olga Schwartz. Igor. I can't think of his first name right now. Schultz, the new prime minister or whatever, the new leader of Germany. He took over for Angela Merkel. His name is Schultz. Last name. But like, he was even in the White House and talking to Biden. And yeah, it was pretty sad. Hey, you on mute.
I don't know. I try to temper, because when I start bringing up one scripture, I'm always going to bring up one.
Go ahead.
It starts another one, and I'm like, should I? But you know what? I'm going ahead and do it.
You really should.
Remember, this one's on my spirit to do it, so I'm gonna have to do it. I'm gonna give you another, because see, remember you were talking about New Testament and Old Testament, and I read them. I believe that the whole thing has to harmonize. If it doesn't harmonize, then either you don't believe it, you don't take it for the you know, as far as prophetic or any of that stuff, you just kind of take lessons from it and leave it at that. But if you say you believe in it, and I, as somebody who believes in it,
I like that characterization, because if you take the Old Testament and New Testament separately rather than together, it's like they're two completely different books. But taken as a whole, it is kind of like a yin-yang balancing thing, where you go from this, you know, sinners in the hands of an angry and vengeful God, Jansenism, Old Testament, powerful, beat your butt God, to this loving, compassionate, huggy, warm, fuzzy God in the New Testament. You know,
because what it is people are just focusing on what they want to focus on, and they're ignoring all this other stuff. Like, I want to show you this. It's like a parent. Is a parent always going to be happy with their kid? No. Is a parent going to whoop their kid's ass sometimes? Of course. And it's the same thing with this. So this is because I ask people, tell me what technology they had that could have done this in this time period. I ask people this. This is Zechariah 14 and 12.
Oh, it was Olaf. You were saying Olaf. That's what it was. Yeah. I had his name on the. Anyways, I'm sorry. Go ahead with Zechariah. My bad.
Zechariah 14 and 12. And there shall be a plague, wherefore the Lord will smite all the people that have fought against Jerusalem. Their flesh shall consume away while they stand on their feet, and their eyes shall consume away in their holes, and their tongue shall consume away in their mouth. Now, can you tell me what kind of weapon could make your eyes and tongue melt away while you're still standing?
TCDD has that effect on people. I'm talking about that tetrachlorodibenzoldioxin action.
But what
has that effect?
But what could do
also
this?
The nuclear bomb.
That's what I'm saying. What could do this on a mass scale?
Mm-hmm.
Only one thing I could think of. Remember Terminator 2? Sarah Connor standing at the fence,
fingers on that chain link fence, holding on, reduced to just a flaming skeleton. Yeah.
And also, if it talks about Babylon being destroyed, and the Bible, it literally says Babylon will be destroyed in 1 hour. What has the ability? What could they have been writing about 1,000 years ago that could what technology did they have in that time period that could destroy something, a whole entire landmass of people burning their eyes away and tongues while they're still standing? They didn't have anything. So obviously this is somebody foreseeing something that's coming.
And I'm not going to completely discount the possibility that they could be referring to technologies that are superior to what we enjoy today, that they had knowledge of, that we have simply lost. Because in the sum total of what I've read and researched thus far about, just take the example of pyramid construction, where they're talking in Central America, South America, the Nile Valley, Bosnia, Herzegovina, they're North America, there are pyramid constructions all around the world. Angkor Wat in Southeast Asia. And these construction methods, some of these binding techniques with different metals, connecting stones together, some of these drillings and holes and borings. I can't explain it. I can't explain it, and I haven't heard anybody explain it to my satisfaction.
Well, you don't know. What if I give you? Let me give you just one more. I'm gonna give you one more, and see if this helps with coming together with a theory. I'll give you just one more. This is. Let me get rid of that. The book of 2nd Ezra 16:13 through 23. For strong is his right hand that bendeth the bow. His arrows that he shooteth are sharp, and shall not miss, when they begin to be shot unto the ends of the earth.
And do you know what a broken arrow is?
Exactly. Tell him what a broken arrow is.
A broken arrow is a nuke that didn't blow, that fell in the wrong hands. A dud, basically. Whereas arrows that shoot that are sharp, that's when you plant that beautiful mushroom cloud up in the ozone layer above.
Now you see where you're going with this.
As featured in the Yona video, World War III, Save Our Economy. And when you get to the very, very end, if you don't mind, I was going to indulge you in a song of about 2 minutes in length. Just
sure.
We can, on the piano. The name of the song is "Priceless Life."
We can end out on money. We can end out on a song. I figure, since I was already bringing up Mystery Babylon, this is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna put this link in the chat for everybody from my other channel. Yeah, I'm gonna just put this link in here for everybody's listening. They can check out my other channel. Let's see. And how long ago did I do this video? Here it is. It's titled "Why America is Mystery Babylon." Let me copy this real quick, and I will put it there in the chat for anybody who's interested in checking it out. Paste. I guess I could show them what it looks like too. I'll show them real quick. Just share it on the screen. So this is my other channel.
All praises, honor, and glory.
Well, so back it up.
Man, I'm still just like in shock waves from that Esdras. That Esdras blew me away, man.
Mm-hmm. So
That was
yeah,
right on time. But see, that's how Scripture does it. You get that Scripture right when you needed to get that Scripture.
Oh yeah,
You know what I'm saying?
it's in the spirit. It's in the spirit, and that's why I'm saying one of these days I want to sit and talk to you about some Native American culture and stuff in the Mosaic Law, because it goes into a lot of stuff that I see some similarities.
I mean, that's actually why I went to the seminary. That's why I studied theology, because I grew up with three different religious traditions. You know, my grandmother's Cherokee traditions, and then my mother and father's Catholic traditions, and then my Japanese babysitter, my Aunt Fumi, her Shinto and Reiki Makikari no Waza traditions. And so by the time I finished high school, I knew I was a very spiritual person. But having been exposed for my entire life up to that point to Katua, Roman Catholicism, and an Asian spirituality, you know, with the Maikari no Waza, you know, or Shinto, basically. It's like Tai Chi, you know, it's more of a. Anyways, at that point, I'm really trying to figure it all out, because I'm conflicted, because I'm a spiritual person, but I'm not really a Zen or a Buddhist, and I'm not really a full-blown Roman Catholic, because, you know, after going a year at the Catholic seminary, they gave me a term paper assignment on the 98 Theses of Martin Luther, which began the entire Protestant Revolution. I agree with everything Martin Luther said, so you couldn't have a more Lutheran conversion than to be converted by Luther's words himself. So at that point, I'm like, I'm not going to be doing Roman Catholic Mass anymore. And after all, I'm more of a Cherokee in my heart, and I'm more spiritual than religious. It's more about the ceremony and the relationships than the sanctity of whatever particular place or building. Because to me,
I'll
the whole earth is sacred. Everything on this earth is sacred. The sky is the sacred earth. You know what I'm saying?
Hebrew Israelites, we believe this is not only our culture but our heritage, and so we go from that standpoint. And we don't look at it as a religion. We don't look at it.
See, that's the same thing with Katua. It's the cultural foundation of our ethics and logic and sciences and fields of academic study. You know, thanks to our written Cherokee language that's over 3,000 years old, it was finally converted from cursive form to printed form by Samuel Worcester, the Moravian missionary, with the Chief Sequoyah just before the Trail of Tears began. And that's why when we marched down the Trail of Tears, we had over 90% literacy in the Cherokee Nation, being able to read and write, either cursive or print or both, as well as speak our Cherokee language. And that's why our culture survives to this day as good as it does, compared to other cultures that have really struggled without an alphabet and have since come to form and adopt their own alphabet. Like in Nunavut with the Yupik and other Inuit peoples. That's the northernmost territory of the provinces of Canada, right, where they enjoy self-rule. I don't use the term Eskimo, because that means cannibal in their language. Kind of they prefer Inuit, but it's the same thing also with other tribes. But I don't want to go on and on. We could go into that more on a Cherokee day. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to this story in East Palestine and making the connections between how this American empire of business was founded with the initial conquistadors and how has it existed ever since. This country was never settled for people. This country was never developed for people. Boston Tea Party wasn't about people. It was about the largest chartered company sanctioned by the Royal Crown at that time, the East India Company, a corporation of its day.
Well, America's
we would call a corporation today. And so it's been corporations, literally the founding of the colonies here and the continued colonization, occupation, enslavement, and exploitation of natural resources, both human and mineral and animal and the like. All of this has been a part of a constant redefining of reality. And in order to redefine reality, you have to completely erase people's family histories, people's tribal histories, people's entire identity. And that is why the concept of the American melting pot is critical and core to what it is to be an American. So that you can say with a straight face that hamburgers, people from the city of Hamburg, Germany, who came up with the hamburger, and Frankfurters in Frankfurt, Germany, who came up with the Frankfurter or the hot dog. Well, never mind that. Nothing is as American as hamburgers and hot dogs, right? But that's German food. Nothing is as American as pizza. Yeah, that's my baby boy Kaya Soda. But you know, nothing is as American as tacos and burritos and pizza and spaghetti. But that pizza and spaghetti is Italian food. Right?
Well, America itself doesn't have a culture. It's like Edward Norton's character in The Italian Job, where he got all that money, and what did he do? He went out and bought everybody else's ideas and everybody else's dreams. That's America. Takes from everybody.
He pulled an Elon Musk. Thank you, PayPal. Thank you, Twitter. Thank you, Tesla. Yak, yak, yak. I did that. Well, he takes credit for it. But, you know, for people that know the history of PayPal and Tesla, there was actually some brains behind it before Elon Musk ever stepped into the picture. Anyway.
Yeah, I'm ready to hear the song.
All right. So the song is called Priceless Life, Worthless Money. And, you know, I put out several albums, a rap mixtape, a dance mixtape, an acoustic mixtape, an indie mixtape in my little project called Bottled Water in the Box Dirt, like alternative music. But this song was inspired by my grandma, my Granny Provis. Worthless Life. I'm sorry, Priceless Life, Worthless Money. So without further ado, let's see here. Priceless life, value beyond measure, friendships and memories to treasure. Cash, it comes and goes, count the grief on your fingers and toes. Hard times, sunny, sure ain't funny. Must be nice, drinks on ice, just this priceless life and worthless money. Ruling criminals beyond reprimand, their castles yet stand on the land. Hard times coming, endure the numbing, trust this night till the brink of light. Such priceless life and endless loving. Priceless life. Woohoo!
Thank
you. There's a couple verses, but I just want to keep it short. You know what I'm saying?
No, I'm like, I wonder if I can get Yona to give me an instrumental of that. I can use that as an intro to this show.
I'll just make you something new. I'm making music every day. You know. The latest two remixes
I don't have
I
an
did.
intro to the show anymore. I kind of came up. I have one for when I do videos, but I'd like to make an intro for this show for what I'm something quick.
I'll send you this one I made using a Cherokee friend of mine, Tommy Wildcat, who's one of the treasures of the Cherokee Nation. He's an aficionado and a maestro on the Cherokee drone flute. His I don't know if you won a Grammy for, but his groundbreaking album, Warrior Flutes. I took samples from different songs in that, and then I put it with a trap beat, and I actually shared it with Cannabis and some other peeps that do freestyle stuff. Because I never did put freestyle on it myself. I ended up pulling some acapellas off of two different tracks of 21 Savage. 21. Because I make music for ballers and for pussies. Shout out 21 Savage. But anyways, I still haven't put a rap on it, and it just seems like I really like it as an instrumental. So I'm going to throw that at you, that Warrior Flute, that new beat. But the last two songs I remixed was Marvin Gaye's "Mercy, Mercy Me," the Ecology.
Yeah, you said
album. What's Going On? I call that song "Emancipation." And then because if you were going to share any song, that would be the song I would share at this point. And I've got that on everywhere at Rumble and BitChute and Odyssey and everywhere. And you'll know it because you'll see the picture of Marvin Gaye smiling. Which for those that may, if it's kind of ringing a bell, sexual healing, in between the sheets, Marvin Gaye, folks. And then the second one I just remixed yesterday is that new track with now I'm gonna forget her name. I remember Cardi B. I'm just thinking Glorilla. Glorilla's her name. It's Tomorrow Twos. Glorilla featuring Cardi B. I just remixed that yesterday. Because I don't know. I mean, just whatever bangs, whatever bumps, whether it's country or bluegrass or gangster rap or African tribal music or Incan music, wherever, any music that bumps, I'll mix it. I don't care. I'll turn it into whatever. Most things I like to turn into house music because you put a nice Chicago or Detroit beat and got that electric bump to it, and you get everybody on the fucking dance floor. And that's what as a DJ, if you can get everybody off the walls, you do a good job.
That's it. Yeah, that's a
for
good.
the people, because there's a lot of people that won't come off the wall for nothing. You know who I'm talking about. But all of a sudden, that one song comes on, and you can't stop. You can't fight the funk, baby. It gets in your blood, man. It's like you got the jumping beans in your pants, man. You can't help but boogie it out, baby. It gets in you, man, like the spirit. You know what I'm saying? Like people in church, when the Holy Spirit is going around like the flames of Pentecost, lighting on people's head, and you see people jump up. You know what I'm saying? Like Blues Brothers with James Brown. Do you see the light? Right? And there's Jake and Elwood in the back. I have seen, backflipping and everything. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I'm definitely take you up on it. We're gonna wrap on some more things. I got your number, you got mine. We'll hit each other up and talk. But yeah, make sure you guys are following Yona. If you guys are not following him, make sure to follow him at least on the Twitter, because things are always dodgy here on I don't know. Lately I've been using that word dodgy a lot. I don't know. I guess I like it. It's a British term, but but I've been using it a lot. Yeah, make sure
wrong with using them terms from old Blighty, dear old Blighty.
Yeah, I think it's an all-encompassing way of nicely saying things are not on the up and up.
Mm-hmm. Sussy Baka, as some would say.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's definitely been a pleasure. Glad to have you on here. This last comment, Baba says, I never realized Yona was so rad. Wealth of info, good stuff. Yeah, I've known Yona's had a lot. I was just figuring, when's a good time to bring him on and the topic, and all the stars aligned perfectly on this one. And so, he was gracious enough to do it, even with, some of the missteps that we had. And honestly, I think some of the stuff he brought up about, the chemical spill and all that, and the connections between Pennsylvania, Ohio, West Virginia, all that stuff right in that area will definitely lead into the interview that I have planned next. I have Octo Squid coming on, who's on the ground there. Are you familiar with him? I'm not sure. He's heard some other stuff, but he's decided now he's going to start getting more into investigative journalism, and this is one of his first kind of things, like really getting into some more serious topics. I ran into him out at the Rage Against the War Machine protest here in California. And so, hopefully I'm gonna get him into more stuff and get more. Well, I plan on getting more and more people. So if you guys have people you'd like to see me interview, just like Yona, please DM me and let me know. But on that note, we are going to close out. Thank you, everybody who joined us, whether you're here.
Anybody that wants to follow me, just look at my name underneath here in the caption where it says Yona, and then underneath it says, Hi, Yona, with the lower caste Peasants Podcast. With that information put into the search bar, you'll be able to find me everywhere, whether it's Venmo or Odyssey or BitChute or Rumble. And I've been uploading all of my content to Rumble and most of my content to Odyssey and BitChute. I don't really use the Venmo, but the best way to follow me is on Twitter. I haven't been taken off Twitter yet, but on Twitter, you can follow me at my legal United States soldier name, Daniel S. Anzelmo, Anzelmo. It's been a constant struggle having two names that I use. And so with all of my children, all 6 of them now, thank you, Lord. All 6 of my children have Cherokee names as their middle names. So, now there's never going to be that again with this new generation of my offspring ever having to explain to people at school, well, this is my Cherokee name and this is my government name. Like one is real and one is, well, Toby's your name. Kunta Kinte don't mean shit. Master calls you Toby, man. It's like, man, the state doesn't get to tell me who to worship. The state doesn't get to tell me what my fucking identity is. I'll find that out from my mom and dad or figure that out for my goddamn self. Uncle Sam don't get to tell me who the fuck I am. Fuck off. But that's how it is with tribal governments and with tribal identification. And the fact is, the vast majority of Cherokees throughout the United States, in the case of the Cherokee tribe, are not living on reservations, nor do they hold a card from the Department of the Interior with Bureau of Indian Affairs logo and your degree of Indian blood quantum, because that gets into the whole thing of enrollment in tribes. So it's really about, where is your heart? How do you live? What do you teach your children? You know, because take a lot of immigrant families that come to this country. Italian parents wouldn't speak Italian to them. Germans wouldn't speak German to them. They said, you're going to be English. You're going to be American. And that's contrasted by other communities that come in and say, we're going to keep our, like Chinatowns, where our children are still going to be learning Chinese and everything. And we're going to have Chinese open and Chinese run businesses in this part of town. I mean, oftentimes the African community has been able to do the exact same thing, particularly in Tulsa. You know, and it just seems, you know, I see this constant attack and targeting and harassment and terrorizing of the black scene in Atlanta today as just a repeat of the same thing that led up to the Tulsa massacre, which I think Wikipedia calls it the Tulsa riot or something. But anyway, we'll talk about that in another one.
Well, yeah, we'll talk.
That was a massacre. But anyways, I'm always talking about history, and this was a great chance to get to draw the connections of history to really the most disgusting, unspeakable act of industrial pollution, I think, in human history.
Yeah.
Palestine.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm saying a lot.
Yeah, I mean, as far as on the land, not factoring in the Deepwater Horizon, but yeah, it's definitely a horrible thing, and we're going to talk more on it. In fact, I might try to see, you know, I don't know if you have any questions that you'd have for Octo Squid, you know, and some of his and his journalism, and we'll go from there. But thank you again, Yona.
Yeah, I would like to help out or just hang out in the background, you know, because I learned so much more by listening than by talking. And it's in these few rare moments when I actually get interviewed by other content creators and podcasters that people get a chance to hear my take on other things. And I really appreciate all of the lovely and vibrant audience and participation with questions and everything. That's how I feel like we all grow together, our collective consciousness, because we have quite the enemy to vanquish. And there's no doubt that victory will be had. But as you said, it's a tough road to hoe, and there's quite a bit of distance to cover.
Yep.
To get there.
Oh, all righty. Everybody have a good one. We'll see you guys all later.
Have a good week. Blessings.